Let's see if it's me.
I have to get reused
To being like virtual. I was all great at all right, let's do that.
Carrie. Now I can talk.
Yep, I can hear you, Bonnie.
Yep. Oh, we're Zoom.
Zoom, not WebEx? Have we switched to Zoom? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, correct. I think Mr.
Okay.
Abelai recommended Zoom.
Good.
I believe I see all of our board members here tonight. And I also see a number of our guests. Thank you, everyone from the Hill Group and others joining us tonight. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, Dr. Felder, are we ready? You ready for me to begin tonight?
Yes, Chair Doyle.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Tonight is Monday, January 24th, 2022, and I'm calling this meeting to order. The Orange County Schools Board of Education pledges to our families, students, staff, and the greater community to conduct our business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks its citizens to conduct themselves with the same courtesy towards all staff members and each other. As per board policy, Robert's Rules of Order will be used to conduct meetings. A moment of silence will be observed before we begin our business. Public comment will be held after the board adopts tonight's agenda. The board, we won't have any electronic disruptions tonight as we're virtual, so I can skip that part. And because we're not meeting in person, we're omitting the Pledge of Allegiance. This is our moment of silence. As we begin our work this evening, I would like to recognize that Orange County Schools was established on land previously settled by the ancestors of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. This board has made a commitment to honor and respect the heritage of Indigenous and all members of our OCS community, to work to undo decades of racial harm, and to build to the best of our ability a community that fosters a sense of belonging for all of our students so that they may thrive and succeed. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Felder, I turn things to you for our recognitions this evening.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. One second, here we go. Okay, well, thank you and good evening, Chair Doyle, Vice Chair Stevens, the entire board, student, staff, and families. This evening, we have two very special recognitions. First, tonight, we want to honor Mr. David Gaddy, math teacher at Orange High School, as this month's Equity Warrior. I want to also point out that Mr. Gaddy is featured in the district's recently released "What Does Equity Mean in Orange County Schools" video. Before I turn the mic over to Mr. Gaddy to say a few words as he's joining us tonight, I'd like to take this opportunity to share portions of statements submitted by one of his colleagues and two of his students. The full statements will be linked into tomorrow's edition of Board Matters. So Mr. Brian Patton, who co-teaches with Mr. Gaddy, had this to say about him. Mr. Gaddy is a great instructor that makes it his business to ensure all students feel welcomed and comfortable in his learning environment. He often tells students their background does not define them and pushes them to be the best they can be. He is an all-round advocate for students, no matter their race, gender, or sexual orientation. Emily Metler, one of Mr. Gaddy's students, said this about him. Mr. Gaddy has shown kindness and compassion like no other teacher I've had before. From the very first day of school, he went the extra mile to ensure that everyone's voice was heard. He allows his students to share their stories with him, and he works to satisfy their learning needs. He would even practice Spanish to better understand and communicate with his minority students. There's a certain warm feeling that you get every day when you walk into the class and see Mr. Gaddy's t-shirts, each one with a message of acceptance and safety printed on them. He is the one teacher I've ever had that makes sure everyone feels comfortable in his class to that extent. Lastly, when reflecting on Mr. Gaddy, student Stephanie Montano said, "The very first day I stepped into his classroom, I was instantly hit with a sense of belonging and welcome. Mr. Gaddy made it clear to every student that anyone of any background, race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, and beyond is more than welcome in his classroom. As a student who identifies as Mexican American, it is easy to feel unseen at times. However, Mr. Gaddy always made the effort to make me and my fellow Latinx students feel understood and welcome. I never felt as comfortable speaking my first language and about my background as I have in his classroom. All he ever strives for his students to have is for them to have the same learning opportunities as any other student, and for them to leave his classroom as better people." Please join me in congratulating and applauding Mr. Gaddy on this well-deserved award. Mr. Gaddy, I understand you're with us, so I turn the mic and camera over to you.
It's one of those things where you're like tapping your leg to keep your emotions in check. I just want to thank everyone for the recognition, especially my students and my road dog Patton for saying those kind words in a span of time that seems ever changing. It's a motivation and encouragement to be recognized for something that many of us in the school system, especially at Orange High School, are fighting for. My dad, when I'm teaching in the classroom, my dad is always looking at me when I sit in this space, and he always told me to do the thing that just makes common sense. And fighting for equity is the common sense thing to do. Equity for learning in the classroom, finding every tool and resource to make even one student successful, fighting for equity for the learning at home, because as we have seen that just like learning styles, learning environments beyond the school are different for every student. Equity for every student that walks in a hallway, because every student deserves to feel safe and loved, no matter their race, gender, ethnicity, or orientation. And I think we are finally peeling back another layer. I was talking to somebody recently of inequity in our world, and that being one of mental health, helping students to advocate for how they are feeling when they need a break, creating spaces to escape to at school, and designating trusted adults to run to when necessary. Because especially for mental health, we all need to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, and to have a place where we feel safe enough to exist. My friend Rick would tell you that some days this profession that we call teaching it feels like trench warfare. Things are constantly changing for us as teachers, and we always have to be ready to pivot. And that is true as we exist alongside a student. They either resist or they push back or they choose to embrace. And we always have to be ready for whatever reaction might be coming. And so, however, for this equity, for this fight for equity, it's a fight on so many fronts, and the fight is worth it. It's a journey, not a destination. It's a table that we're invited to and that we can eat from. Not a table reserved for just teachers and students, but for parents and community stakeholders. The thing is, I'm not perfect at this. I still work through my own ways of seeing and doing and looking at the world. But I dare to do this work of constantly asking how I can do better. That's one of the shirts that I wear, is always ask how you can do better. Because when I do better, my students benefit. And that's the thing that matters the most. And so again, thank you for this recognition, because it reminds me that I still have work to do tomorrow. Appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gaddy. We appreciate you so much and all that you do to ensure all students have what they need to succeed. You are the epitome of an equity warrior in Orange County schools. Keep up the great work. As shared at the January 10th board meeting, the month of January is designated as School Board Recognition Month. Initiated by the National School Boards Association in 1995, 2022 marks the 27th anniversary of School Board Recognition Month. So tonight, we want to express our sincere gratitude to the Orange County School Board of Education again by sharing a 2-minute video from our students, the very people we are all here to serve.
Good evening. May I please have everyone to mute?
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for helping our community.
Thank you for being considerate to teachers. Thank you for keeping us safe from the virus. Thank you for trying to find my balance. Thanks for tackling the big problems. Thanks for being the best ever.
One.
Thank you, good one. Thank you, C-H-A-N-K-Y-O-U. Thank you, good one. Thank you, thanks. Let's listen to it. That was cool.
I thought that was pretty good.
Dr. Felder, you're muted.
Thank you. So what a great tribute to our board. Again, thank you all. I would also like to send a special thank you to the music teacher, Mr. Patrick Mitchell from River Park Elementary School, and to the very, very talented student musicians from River Park Elementary School. This concludes tonight's recognitions.
Thank you, Dr. Felder. And Mr. Gaddy, your passion in creating a sense of belonging in your classroom is really a powerful example for all of us. And Mr. Mitchell, thank you. And thanks all your students for us for their delightfully encouraging video. At this time, we are ready for our agenda adoption. Do I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Okay, second. I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. McKenzie. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes. Ms. Hauser
Yes.
and Ms. McKenzie
Yes.
and Dr. Moore
Yes, ma'am.
and Ms. Smiley
Yes.
and Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now is the time for public comments. After each speaker has been recognized and unmuted, they will have 3 minutes to speak. The board will not have a discussion with any speaker. No profane or vulgar language will be permitted, nor personal abuse against any person. Any speaker that uses threatening language will not be permitted to continue. Public comments should not address any specific confidential student or personnel matter. Complaints concerning any specific employee or student are not permissible during public comments, and speakers must conclude their remarks at the end of their 3 minutes. And I believe we have 4 speakers tonight. And our first one is Ms. Catherine Kluwer.
I don't see her on the attendee list, sorry.
Okay, she also, let me see if she responded. She had also emailed And I sent the Zoom link to her. And do you see her phone number by any chance?
No phone number.
Okay, like there's no participants just dialed in.
No.
Okay, well, let's continue with Ms. Schmid. And if Ms. Kluwer joins, she can go at the end. Do you see Ms. Gretchen Schmid?
She's been.
Okay. Welcome, Ms. Schmid. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Okay, good evening. The board's mask mandates are being unlawfully imposed by this Board of Education. They clearly deprive the students, teachers, staff, and visitors of their natural and God-given right to breathe freely, their privilege to live normal lives while in and on OCS property. It also deprives and degrades their natural immune system that automatically protects all humans from diseases, all because of the mandated medical device mask that does harm to their human bodily functions. Most egregiously, you're doing this to every single individual child under care in the schools. There is no law that gives you the authority to inflict this heinous demand on anyone. You have made it up on your own under the color of law. You never had the legal authority or the responsibility to take this action. It applies to the entire board, all of you, as you have all set this policy. I'm no lawyer, but you appear to be committing and remain in the process of continuing to commit this federal crime, Title 18 USC Section 242, deprivation of rights under the color of law. Whoever, under the color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any person, any state, territory, or commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both, and if bodily injury results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if such acts include the use, attempted use, or threatened use of a dangerous weapon, explosives, or fire, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both, and if death results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if such acts include kidnapping or an attempt to kidnap, aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to commit aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to kill, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for any term of years or life or both, or may be sentenced to death. I demand that you immediately reverse this course by striking any and all medical mandates, including but not limited to wearing a mask under any circumstances while on OCS property. This also applies to attendance at your board meetings. This comment and letter constitutes knowledge of the jeopardy that all of you are facing. You can no longer claim ignorance of the situation that has been created. The choice is yours. We all know, and even from the last board meeting, that these practices are in question as to their effectiveness. So you're erring on the side of let's hurt the children, because we already know there's dental impacts. There's now proven speech impediments to the children, and the list goes on. So we're asking you to err on the side, since there's no conclusive evidence that these practices actually stop the passing of a cold. We also know from the last meeting that the children are in no greater risk to this cold than they are to driving to school each and every day. So we're asking for some sense to come into the situation, and let's actually do what's healthier for the children.
Thank you, Ms. Schmid. Next, we have Ms. Frances Ann Criffield.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome. Your 3 minutes begin now.
Making the books Genderqueer, Law and Boy, and Out of Darkness available to minors under the age of 16 directly or indirectly is a violation of NC General Statutes 14190.7 and 14190.15 as analyzed using the defined terms, specifically without limitation, obscenity as defined in the context of minors as set forth in section 14191, obscene literature and exhibition, subsection D, sexual conduct as defined in subsection C, and the terms defined in 14190.13 definitions for certain offenses concerning minors. You will recall that Genderqueer features a drawing of a child fantasizing about giving oral sex to the child's bearded teacher. I have confirmed that Cedar Ridge followed Board Policy 3210 when reviewing the books and did not review the books against the applicable state statutes. Board Policy 3210 does not require or even suggest analysis of the books in light of the laws set forth in NC 14190 et al. In addition, the review committee interpreted Board Policy 3210 to require that no written record was to be made of the review process. The development of ideas, opinions, or experiences of sexual conduct of minors in OCS's care are not, for OCS or its employees, in any way a legitimate example of OCS and its employees carrying out its legitimate function, or an employee or agent of such organization acting in that capacity and carrying out the legitimate duty of his employment, which would be required for a defense to the violation of 14-190-15. This defense was intended by the legislature to cover sex education class content, not the development of ideas, opinions, or experiences of sexual conduct of minors. Note that there is no defense available for 14-190.7, under which the book Genderqueer squarely falls. Even if we apply the rule established in the United States versus one book called Ulysses, where the case law on the subject matter originates, the literary merit argument fails. Judge Hand declared that art for art's sake is not obscene, but the use of obscenity in the explicit books in controversy is meant by the authors of all three books' own words in interviews, as well as the supporters of the books in the media and on information and belief, even employees of OCS. The purpose is to influence the sexual development of minors. Therefore, the erotic passages in the challenge book, while submerged in the explicit books, do in fact have a material and intentional resultant effect to expose minors, even those under the age of 16, to sexual content reasonably determined to be obscene to a minor. I am the parent of a queer child, and as the former member of the board of directors of the largest LGBTQ+ youth organization in the country for almost a decade, I see these books furthering the stereotype that queer kids are somehow more sexually mature and not capable of being victims of sex crime in the same way as straight kids. These books are likely to exacerbate the data that shows that queer kids are more often the victims of sexual crimes. My role at Youth Pride, I saw the devastating effects on queer youth of perpetuating this vicious stereotype found in the explicit books causes, up to and including death. There are many excellent, affirming, strengthening, and centering books available for queer youth that do not undermine their journey the way the books about queer kids that focus on obscenity and sexual content as heavily as the authors of these books have stated that they intended to do. I've included in my written comments suggestions for the board to improve their policies and to deal with these books. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Craffield. Our fourth speaker is Ms. Snipes.
I do not see her listed in the attendee.
Okay. And Ms. Catherine Cloer, C-L-O-E-R. Is she in attendance?
I do not see her either.
Okay.
Excuse me, there's a Crystal. That may be her. Do you want me to unmute Crystal Clore?
Sure.
Hello?
Is this Miss Crystal Cloer?
Yes, and I apologize. I was having trouble getting connected to the Zoom link. So I'm sorry if it's already time for public comment and you've been waiting for me.
No, they just had Catherine signed up though. Is that your daughter or is she here?
Same person.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Ms. Cloer. Your time starts now.
A sincere thank you to each of you for the time you have committed to devoting to the academic achievement of the children in our schools. Academic learning is the primary purpose of the public school system and should therefore be the focus of our combined efforts as a school board and a community. As one of your constituents, I would like to request updated information regarding the school report card published by the state each year in order to better ascertain how we are doing in meeting our primary purpose. I've not seen that data in the past year and would just like to know how to access it. Also, I wish to clearly state that the use of pornography in our system for the supposed purposes of academic instruction is never, ever acceptable. Allowing such potentially harms the students whose well-being you have been chosen to guard and protect. The Bloomberg School of Health, in a study entitled Predicting the Emergence of Sexual Violence in Adolescence, states that porn is turning children into sex offenders. 70% of high school boys who were frequent viewers reported that such made them want to try out what they had seen. The average age of the first perpetration of sexual violence by offenders is 15 to 16 years old and is associated with exposure to porn. Porn results in a lifetime of porn addiction, dangerous sexual behavior, and harmful brain rewiring, especially when viewed by adolescents and teens. Specifically, porn causes the erosion of willpower and shrinkage in the part of the brain involved with decision-making, motivation, and academic performance. For a youth, this could profoundly alter the trajectory of his or her life. Why in the world would we risk such exposure, potentially beginning in the school library or in the classroom? Other measured implications of porn use include self-isolation from family and peers, as well as increased levels of anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. Each of these particular implications are already problems with the youth of today. Again, why in the world would our school system do anything at all to make these huge problems even more likely? Studies reveal a connection between porn consumption and harmful sexual behavior, including an increased likelihood of committing sexual harassment and rape. I ask again, why would our school leadership do anything at all to make sexual harassment and rape more likely? Our school board would never approve of simply making available cigarettes or bottles of vodka in baskets on the library shelves for our children to grab if they wanted to. Why? Because we all know that smoking and alcohol consumption are harmful addictive behaviors. No one takes their first sip of alcohol ever planning to become an alcoholic. Pornography addiction works exactly the same way. Why would we increase the risk of the futures of our children being devastated by the result of pornography exposure? The library can't be a minefield for children who attend public school, yet by highlighting books like Gender Queer, which even the public library has the good sense to categorize in the adult graphic novel section of the building, our libraries have become potentially hazardous. A student could be seeking a resource on a number of valid school subjects and through no intention of their own stumble upon this porn. You're displaying a reckless disregard for the well-being of school children, not only in their present stage of life, but also in their futures. And we shouldn't desire to shape a teen's sexual template by deviant fantasies. Schools should be places where our children can thrive and be free from the life-altering consequences resulting from porn exposure during the most formative years of life. Your constituents are calling you into account and ask you to please wisely respond by acting immediately to withdraw such dangerous books from all of our school media centers. Thanks so much for considering this really important issue.
Thank you, Ms. Clure. Mr. Schofield, is Ms. Snipes, or Mr. Jones, is Ms. Snipes still not here?
I do not see her on the list.
Okay, thank you so much. So that concludes our public comment. Okay, it is time for our consent agenda. We have 4 items on consent tonight. We have minutes from the January 10th open session, the January 10th personnel report, Sportsplex access for staff, and the request to convert a temporary certified nursing assistant position to a permanent position for continued support to schools and school nurses. Are there any items that board members would like to move to the regular agenda for further discussion? And if not, can I have a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair. This is
Second.
Brenda.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Ms. McKenzie, I believe. Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
And Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
Great, thanks, everybody. Okay, we have our first discussion action item. And Dr. Felder, am I going to pass it to you or am I passing it to Ms. Blefko?
Chair Doyle, you are passing it to Ms. Sandra Blefko, who is the coordinator of family engagement.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here tonight, Ms. Blefko.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening, Ms. Doyle, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Felder. The resolution to protect English language learner students has ensured that our schools have more equitable access to language for our students and families. An important of our district and schools communication efforts is providing interpretation and translation services to our families. Spanish is just one of several languages native to our students, families, and community. We continue working hard in order to close the gap in communication with our families. And this is a shared responsibility among all Orange County School staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Blefko, for all that you do for our families. Ms. Smiley, would you like to share the resolution with us tonight?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Blefko, for that introduction and just everything that you and your team of family liaisons are doing to increase language access and to strengthen partnerships with our English language learner families. And before I read the resolution, I also just wanted to quickly thank everyone who partnered on this. So first, I want to thank the staff at the community organization ISLA for reaching out to propose this resolution. ISLA works with a number of OCS families. And Natalia Rivadeneira from ISLA is listening in tonight, and I'd like to thank her for her advocacy and her leadership in developing the language of the resolution. I'd like to thank Dr. Felder and her team for contributing with different lenses of community communications and family engagement, curriculum and instruction and equity, and especially to our ESL facilitator, Miss Emily Lewis. And the last thing is, just at the same time that we were working on this resolution, I also happened to attend the student belonging forums where board members could hear straight from students what was helping them feel a sense of belonging at school and what was harming that. And there happened to be some students who were English language learners who brought up stories about times that an adult at school had made them, as English language learners, feel like they didn't belong. And unsurprisingly, that had also hurt their ability to learn and succeed. So hearing from our students really brought this home. And I'm just very grateful to those students for sharing their stories and wanted to thank them. And also just think this is great timing with the honoring of David Gaddy tonight, because just hearing so many connections there to his work. So I just want to thank him and the other teachers working for our students as well. So with that, the resolution to protect English language learner students. Whereas receiving a sound basic education is a constitutional right, and failing to provide it is unconstitutional and has more significant negative impacts for students of color, students from economically disadvantaged families, students with disabilities, and English language learners, ELL. Whereas English language learners are among the least likely to be on grade level academically of any subgroup in North Carolina, according to state testing, are the least likely to be on grade level in Orange County schools, and can be excluded from participating in standards-based tests when proper accommodations are not provided. Whereas Orange County Schools currently has 827 English language learners who speak 34 languages enrolled in Orange County schools. Whereas English language learners can experience high levels of discrimination in school based on race, language, accent, and current country of origin, and are more likely to experience mental health struggles. Whereas English language learners and their families still hesitate to speak their mother tongue in public settings due to how they have been historically discriminated against. Whereas this board has recognized the importance of taking intentional steps to ensure access to a sound basic education and is actively working towards meeting the goals set forth in the district's strategic plan. Whereas the Orange County School Strategic Plan has recognized equity as a central focus of its goals, among which are to decrease achievement gaps and increase achievement of all students, to increase diversity of district staff, and to provide an inclusive environment where all students have a sense of belonging. Whereas this board in Board Policy 1030 describes its aim to eliminate racial discrimination, inequities of opportunity, and academic disparities in the district, whilst promoting schools as centers for culturally diverse learning where all students are educated to their fullest potential. Whereas this board is in agreement with and passed a resolution to fully support the approval and implementation of the Leandro Plan, and recognizes that adequate education cannot be provided in an environment that does not reject all forms of discrimination. Whereas the Orange County Schools Board of Education stands ready to address the struggles of English language learners as one of the groups with the greatest needs and challenges to meet their full potential. Therefore, be it resolved that this board celebrates the strengths and assets that English language learners' families bring to our diverse school communities and supports school efforts to build strong partnerships with the families of English language learners as a core part of our child-centered approach to education. Be it further resolved that Orange County Schools will identify strategies that are most effective for serving English language learners and will then incorporate them into the instructional framework for all content areas, to include such components as effective instruction and academic, social, and post-secondary support, family and community engagement, and professional development. Be it further resolved that Orange County Schools will regularly monitor and report on the effectiveness of the strategies being implemented for each component of effective instruction and academic, social, emotional, and post-secondary support, family and community engagement, and professional development, and engage in continual improvement. Be it further resolved that this board will continue to respect, support, and promote inclusive environments for English language learners within Orange County Schools facilities and spaces, and will continue to work tirelessly to eliminate any form of injustice in our schools, including against English language learners. Be it further resolved that this board welcomes open conversations, activities, cultural events, and all expressions of unity that help to address the needs of ELL students. Adopted by the Orange County Board of Education.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Ms. Blefko and Ms. Emily Lewis and other staff members who worked to craft this resolution, particularly our community partners and people from ILA. Would any board member like to comment or have a discussion about this resolution? There's generally unanimous support, so I will take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Motion from Ms. Smiley and the second from Ms. McKenzie. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes, definitely yes.
Thank you so much. This has been approved. And it reminds me, I was thinking of Mr. Gaddy's words that fighting for equity is the common sense thing to do. So we all can keep doing better as we try to do that. It's good to hear tonight. Okay, now we are ready, Dr. Felder, to turn it back to you and our two information items for this evening.
Thank you, Chair Doyle. And as we transition, I want to say thank you to the board for your support in promoting the rights, needs, and contributions of, and for your commitment to our English language learners by way of this resolution. Okay, so tonight, I'm going to turn things over to Rhonda Rath, Chief Finance Officer for the district, who will kick off this segment of tonight's board meeting regarding the findings from the classified salary study conducted by the Hill Group, members of which are joining us tonight. Before I do, I just want to state that the sole purpose for the Hill Group's presentation tonight is to hear about their process and findings regarding the classified salary study. Before turning things over to the Hill Group, Mrs. Rath will outline next steps and actions that will follow the Hill Group's presentation. So at this time, I turn things over to Mrs. Rath.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you this evening to talk about this and to have Hill Group share their findings. Before we turn it over to them, as Dr. Felder stated, I would like to take a minute to walk you through and the public through the timeline in regards to what we're envisioning for the next steps associated with this process. Tonight, Hill Consultants will provide you with the report and the findings and talk with you about their process and how they looked at us against other public school units as well as our competitive market. The next step will be that we are having a work group scheduled with the board to spend some time digging in with you surrounding our salary scales and how they align with the state and the supplement and have in-depth discussions to provide clarity. On February the 7th, we will be bringing back before the board our recommendations of responding to the findings that you will hear this evening, and we will also be providing the costs associated with that. The next step will be then to address again at the budget committee as part of our budget for the next coming school year. We will take a deeper dive as we need to into these recommendations and into each of the salary components. and how they will be impacting our budget that we will be presenting to the commissioners. Next slide, please. From there, we will move into the first meeting in March, on March the 7th, where we will be bringing the superintendent's recommended budget for the 2022-23 school year to the board. Addressing salary compression will be a major component of this budget. From there, on March the 22nd, there will be a budget public hearing where the board will discuss the recommended budget and the public will have an opportunity to make comments. At that time, the board will also be providing staff any direction to incorporate in what will become their 22-23 local operating budget. On April the 11th, the board will adopt its local operating budget that will be submitted to the county commissioners. Next slide, please. We also wanted to take a moment to go into a little bit more depth about why this process and this timeline is set out the way it is. Funding to implement these salary adjustments associated with this study are going to be needed from county commissioners. Fund balance is used for one-time expenditures and cannot be utilized for recurring budget needs like salaries, as it cannot sustain them ongoing for multiple years. Without commissioner approval, any salary adjustments would be considered unfunding and require budget reductions in other areas. So therefore, that is why we incorporate this as part of our budget discussions of what we will be asking our commissioners to fund us for the next school year. So with that, unless there's any burning questions, I'm going to turn it over to Hill Consultants, let them share with you their presentation and their findings. And then if we could hold questions until they are finished, I believe that would be fantastic.
Okay, Rhonda, thank you so much for the introduction.
Yes, go right ahead. You're loud and clear.
Very good, very good. Madam Chair, members of the board, we thank you for allowing us to present to you this evening. This will be a joint presentation between Ricky Lopes, Kathy Eisenhower, and myself, all our partners in our firm. Basically, we are all career educators. We're CPAs, and we're on the finance HR side as far as our presentation tonight. We have worked in over 80 of the 115 school districts across North Carolina, doing various and sundry operational type studies, finance HR primarily. We've done a yellow bus study there in Orange County schools. We've done risk management studies. We've done several different studies in so many districts across the state. And one of the main things we've been working on the last several years are salary studies. Just last week, we were in the Southeast RESA in Jacksonville, North Carolina, presenting our salary study to 13 districts in a RESA, basically comprising of 13 districts and so forth. And there's been a lot of interest in salary studies over the last few years. I'm actually basically covering the first 2 or 3 slides of our PowerPoint presentation now. But anyway, 13 districts we presented to, and part of our methodology in doing our studies is to do interviews of staff. We feel that it's one of the most important parts of our presentation and methodology in doing that, because when we hear from classified staff members, we hear many points about the compression that has taken place since 2008 in salary schedules and so forth across the state. A lot of your employees were very open and honest in making their presentations to us, sharing information. We asked questions in a non-threatening environment to them to give us information. But basically, a lot of the classified staff in your district have been overlooked for many years, since 2008, primarily the Great Recession. Steps and have been frozen. Very little raises have taken place. The compression has caused employees that are newly hired to be on higher salary ranges than those existing employees that you have. And that can cause a lot of morale issues. The other thing is part of our methodology in our study, we compare you with private industry and try to compare the job settings for the arena that you're in. Orange County, as everyone well knows, with Chapel Hill being included there, is a high growth area, an area where demand for employees is greater than the supply of employees that are available, primarily in the trade areas. When we start talking about the maintenance area, electricians, HVAC, plumbing, those that require license are in very high demand across your county as well as in your region. In the area of bus drivers, all across the state, there's been bus driver shortages due to CDL license and so forth, those kind of things that we're going to talk about when we jump into the study itself. So at this point, I'm going to call on Mr. Lopes to start our presentation based on where we stand. And then Ms. Eisenhower and I will be kind of chirping in from time to time to give you our thoughts on our presentation.
Thank you, Hank. Good evening, Chairperson Doyle, board members, Superintendent Felder, and others that are listening on to the presentation. And if we could go to slide 4, we'll start with that one. And Hank's talked about some of these things, but one thing I want you to remember as we go through the presentation, whoops, I'm sorry, I may be off by one. There we go. I'm sorry. What we have to remember that for the past 13 years, your classified employees have received virtually no significant raises. They had small one-time bonuses, and they've had 1% a couple times, and they had 2.5% this year, which was the biggest raise they've had in 13 years. So as we go along, just remember we're talking about trying to make up for 13 years of no raises in this time of rising inflation, and of course the economy is booming. If we go down to the very last bullet, one thing that's not unique to Orange, but one thing that you have to be aware of is how competitive your market is, and you live in a high living area as far as what it takes to live there and to be competitive with wages, because the people around you pay high wages, whether it be other school systems, whether it be other municipalities, the private industry. So as we go through this presentation, please just bear that in mind. If we go to the next slide, please. This kind of bears it out. It shows you what the average wages are in the different metropolitan areas that are represented here. And so you can see that North Carolina as a whole is lower, but Orange County and the surrounding areas have high wages. And so that's something that you're competing against to be able to get quality employees for your district. Next, please. This is the state salary schedule. And I just want you to see this for a couple of reasons. One, your beginning salary is already significantly higher than the first 13 steps or grades that go up to number 62. You're already paying a $15 an hour living wage. The state has not reached that point yet. And so one of the issues with the state salary schedule is that inherently the way it's built, it's not going to do anything for your employees. And so it has the same minimum wage for the first 8 or 9 steps, the same minimum. Okay, so that's why a separate scale is needed for the districts, for those that want to do more than what the state is providing. The other thing that you have to remember with these state salary scales is they provide a minimum and a maximum, but they don't provide any type of step within those minimums and maximums. And without getting into a whole lot of detail, the state has not provided the money for you to give steps within those ranges. So basically what's happened is the state has pushed the issue of the compression down to the local units. The state has not provided the money for you to be able to give the steps that are needed for your classified employees. And that's why, unfortunately, we're in the situation that we're in right now, basically asking or showing you how you'll need to request additional monies to pay for these steps that have not been provided over the last 13 years. Next, please. That's just a continuation of the other slide. If you want to go to the next one, please. These are the folks, the positions of the folks that we interviewed. And like Hank said, we can look at job descriptions, but I don't think we've done a salary study yet. We've talked about 45 or 50 districts with salary studies. where we didn't learn from talking to the employees versus reading the job description. A lot of times the job descriptions are outdated, if one's there at all. Find out that employees are doing multiple jobs. Somebody has left the system and they've been asked to absorb some of the other duties that were not theirs to start with. But these are the folks that we talk to, and it's just a sample group of all the employees that are represented in your district. Next, please. What were our findings? We would recommend or find that you need a salary schedule with 30 steps to reflect years of experience. And right now, your salary schedules have 42, I believe it's 42 steps, either 41 or 42 steps. So very rarely are you going to have an employee that works 42 years. 30 years is the magic year for retirement purposes. And so generally, we like to see the salary schedule go up to 30 years. I think you have it's either 23 or 26 employees that have more than 30 years of experience. And so as you can see, going above 30 would not serve a purpose because you have such a small number of people that are above the 30. If you are able to fund a salary scale that we're recommending, that would correct the situation that your veteran employees have been in for the last 13 years. Those that moved up to $15 an hour when you incorporated your living wage, they received an immediate increase. That person that was making $15.01 an hour or 15, just barely over 15, did not see the results of that. And so these veteran employees that have been with you for a while have not seen a significant increase once again in 13 years. Another finding, historically, principals that want to make a career out of education, a lot of them want to move up through central services onto the superintendency. So to do that, they have to get experience in central services. Well, for them to come to central services requires at least an equal salary, if not a small increase, to come to central services. So what we like to see is a scale that ties the principal salaries into central services so that a principal can see if that particular position is worth them coming into the central services and their progression. We will have a schedule at the end of this, a recommended schedule that kind of incorporates that. Consistent policies are needed for placing employees on the salary schedule. So we see this everywhere we go. What experience are employees given credit for? Is it 1-for-1? Do they get credit for outside school system experience? What if they come from a neighboring school district? Do they get 1-for-1? Do we start them off at 0? Whatever policy is in place or procedure, it needs to be in writing. It needs to be consistently applied. And salary schedules should be available once they're approved on the district website, and it should be easy to understand. You'll see when we get to the end, our schedule is very easy to comprehend, and an employee could easily find where they would fit with just knowing a couple pieces of information. Okay, next, please. By the numbers, these are the size of the different information about the cohorts that we compared you to, and you'll see they're all in your geographic area because of the market. If we could, just as for an example, if we compared you to a district that had 7,000 students in the Southeast region where I'm from, it wouldn't be very comparable because the salaries are not as high in the marketplace, and it's a different, you wouldn't have the employee making the kind of money in the marketplace down here that they make up in your part of the state, up in the Triangle area. Let's look at the next one, the estimated median family income. There's a lot of different sources of information that come from the U.S. Census Bureau, and this is one of them. The Department of Commerce provides a database where they take selected data from the U.S. Census Bureau for all 100 counties. And if you go into that website, you'll see there's a 4-page report on every district. Well, there's also different sources of income. There's family income, there's household income, there's per capita income. With the median family income, it requires to have at least 2 or more people related by blood in the same household. So you're looking at a husband-wife or husband-wife for 2 kids or whatever. And so the family income is going to be higher than a head of household income. If I'm a single person living in an apartment and I just got out of school and I'm making $30,000 a year, that's a head of household. If I've got 2 people making $30,000 a year, husband and wife, that's going to be $60,000 on the family income. So family income is going to be a higher number than head of household. So that's just for clarification when you're looking at the numbers. But the point we're trying to get across here is the family income in Orange County, and once again, it includes, the Chapel Hill area, is high in comparison to your neighboring districts, but also in comparison to the state. Even though we don't have the state average on there, you are in an area that requires a high wage, so to speak, to get by. Let's look at the next thing there, total local spending per pupil. If you actually go to the form website, it includes city systems with the county. So we took that out. And so once we took the city funding out for the city school system, Orange County was still at $4,113 per student of local funding, which once again compares favorably with those that are in the area. But look at the state average; it's only $1,700 per student. So from a money standpoint, Orange County does have resources that other districts do not have across the state. Next, please. Ability to pay, that's also in the public school forum publication, and it shows that there's two numbers in that first graph. One is what's the ability of the county to pay for schools, and so the lower the number, the higher the ability. So in this case, you can see that 4 of you are right there neck and neck. Orange, Chatham, Durham, and Wake are virtually the same as far as the ability to pay. But from an effort standpoint, Orange is doing better than those that surround you. Now, if you go, once again, it included the city numbers. And so we went and took the city information out. When we take the city information out, the Orange relative effort goes to 24th, which is still very competitive. But the 4 number up at the top included the city supplemental tax, which obviously does not affect the Orange County school system. So we did take that out. We can go to the next slide. So now let's look at actual salaries for one of your positions, which is principals. And obviously in an education, that's one area where we know good principals attract good educators. And so what does it take? It's not always, as a matter of fact, we talked to some of your principals and money was not obviously the biggest issue for them. Otherwise they could have already left and gone to some of these other systems. But for some folks, they can just make a 10 or 15 minute drive and get significantly more local money in their salary. So you can see that this is an average for last year, but the average principal supplement in Orange was $19,000. So Alamance and Chatham are below you, but if you look at Chapel Hill, Durham, and Wake, they're significantly above you. So if you wanted to be competitive with those districts, it would require an increase, and we're going to go over that increase in just a second. And while we're talking about principals, the principal salary schedule has changed a couple of times in the last few years with the state. They don't recognize experience on this principal scale anymore. All they recognize is size of school, and they don't even recognize the type of school. And I know there's folks that can look at this both ways, but 1,000 student high school makes the same thing as 1,000 student elementary school, based on the state's principal scale. And so some of those differences that we may think need to be taken into consideration is where your local supplement comes into play. And so in just a minute, we'll look at a salary supplement for the local principals and other employees, obviously, or local salary changes. So I just want to give you a little synopsis of the principal's information. And in the big report, you'll see more detail. I should have told you this to start with. We're trying to summarize this just for sake of time and for brevity. Of course, we'll answer any questions you have, but we're trying to summarize the report for you in a few slides. Next, please. Observations. If we look at your salary schedule, the schedule is very competitive. The problem is not that the schedule is being able to implement the schedule. So what happens is your minimum salaries are very competitive. But once you get to the midpoint and the maximum, because you have 13 steps that are frozen, your employees are not getting to the midpoint and maximum when they should. Once again, remember, you have to get to 42 years to get to the maximum. Okay, and so your midpoint is going to be somewhere in the mid-20s. So once again, the scale looks good. If all we did was look at a piece of paper and said, what's your salary scale look like? We just said, y'all are doing good. What do you need us for? But when you look at the actual salaries compared to the salary, that's where you're seeing the problem. employees don't understand how their salaries are set or how employees get pay raises. Sometimes they'll see somebody within the district or within their own department get a raise and they wonder how that particular person got a raise. That's going to happen no matter which district we go to, but we do want to make it easy for employees to understand understand why they're making what they make. And hopefully when we get finished, we'll be able to show that. We already talked about the next bullet about the lower paid employees moved up to the living wage, but it resulted in grade compression. There's two types of compression. We've been talking about the 13-step compression. Grade compression is when you move up in position from a pay standpoint, and you don't get an increase by going to that next grade. That's grade compression. Well, to be able to afford to pay people at $15 an hour to maintain that spread all the way up through your salary scale, you'd have to decompress your grades also to help those employees that are in other positions that are above the lower classified positions. Right now, the school system uses three different levels, three different terms of employment for three different pay scales. Our recommendation is going to be one pay scale. If you're a custodian for 10 months and I'm a custodian for 12 months, the monthly salary should be the same. The only difference is that the person working 12 would get 2 more months of pay. So we would simplify that by just having one salary schedule for type of employment as opposed to multiple salary scales. We see the title of specialist and coordinator all throughout the state, and not that there's anything inherently wrong with it, it's just that it can be used for any number of positions, and so it's hard to determine what a specialist or coordinator is compared to another specialist or coordinator. Sometimes it's used as justification to give folks pay raises. Just change the title. That sounds better, than technician or clerk or whatever. So sometimes you'll see specialist and coordinator. We like to see other titles used that more closely identify what the position is. And we just talked a minute ago about the principal supplements. Once again, if you want your principal supplements to be competitive, you've got 3 in your cohort or 3 in your region that pay significantly more in principal supplements. Next, please. Recommendations. We're recommending a 30-step scale, and we're recommending a 1.5% increase between steps and 3% between grades. And it may not be 3% all the way across. The steps are pretty consistent, but the grades may not be as you go all the way towards the end. But once again, we tried looking at even higher numbers. We didn't think it would be reasonable to be able to afford more than the 1.5%. Not that, and even the 1.5% can be modified. This is just based on what we put together. If you decide you want it to be 2 or 2.5, it can be. If you want it to be 1, for an affordability standpoint, that can happen also. One thing you need to remember, each year, because you're dependent on the state for most of the funding for the increase from year to year, the scale is going to have to be adjusted each year to reflect that. For example, let's say the state gives a 3% raise next year, and you recommend this scale and it only has a 1.5 step increase. You would need to adjust the scale to reflect the 3% so that 1.5% of it is a step and 1.5% of it's cost of living. So, but there'd be a 3% increase instead of 1.5. But what if it goes the other way? What if it's a 1% increase? Is the district going to have enough money to pick up the other 0.5%? If not, you've got to adjust your scale the other way. So this is a breathe-in, move-in document. Once again, because of the way schools are funded in North Carolina, you have to wait to see what the state's going to do unless you're fortunate enough to have enough money to pay for a raise for all your classified employees out of local money every year. And I doubt if you're able to afford that. I don't know of any districts that you could pay a raise for every classified employee with just local money. Employees should be placed on the salary scales based on years of experience. Right now, in your data file, every employee has a longevity years of experience. We recommend using July 1 in this case of 2022 as your longevity years of experience and place the people on that schedule accordingly. And then from that point on, whatever your experience policy is, you would incorporate that. So if you hired somebody that had 10 years of experience that would come in, they would get experience on the scale. But we have to remember your existing employees, for the most part, are going to get a 13-step increase because we're incorporating it from 42 down to 30 steps. And so for the most part, the existing folks are going to get credit for this experience they've had retroactively, whereas a new employee would get it, as they come in. The next bullet kind of reflects what what I've already said. You're going to have to revise the schedule each year to either increase or decrease what that step increase is going to be based on what the state does and your local funding to be able to continue paying for the increases from this point forward. One thing on that state salary schedule that I didn't mention, the way the state does those salary schedules, it perpetuates compression because every year they change the minimum by whatever raise the state gives. So let's just use a quick example. If a person makes $3,000 a month right now, and they just started and they're at the zero level, next year they're going to go to the year one. And let's say the state gives a 2% raise, they're going to go to $3,060. Well, the state changes the minimum to $3,060 on their scale. So right away, you've built a step of compression because the person that's just beginning is going to get the same thing as a person that's been here a year. So there's some things the state does that we don't necessarily agree with as far as a lot of things, to be honest, as far as the salaries are concerned, but that's one of them. The way they do those minimums and maximums perpetuates the compression.
Let me say too, Ricky, if I can give you just a minute of a break. I was reviewing my notes this morning from some of our interviews we had last fall with your classified staff, and there's a lot of frustration because they don't really understand the difference between the state giving raises in prior years to state employees and why school district employees were not included in those raises. They don't understand, obviously, the role of the General Assembly in appropriating the funds for the state raises that have been so scarce over the last several years. And, in many prior years when recruitment and retention efforts came about for school districts, those of us have been around for many, many years can remember at a time when school districts were the place to work and schools could recruit from cities and counties, the employees that they had. And now what we've seen across the state and in many places is the exact opposite, where cities and counties are now hiring our classified workers away from school districts. A lot of frustration from that perspective.
Thank you, Hank. We talked about deleting the 3 different designations for the salary levels and just having one. That once again, that simplifies it for the employees. The last bullet is also a flexible recommendation. We recommend 1-for-1 experience for similar work out in the marketplace with a cap of 10 years, but for your hard to find areas, we would recommend that you give even more than that if that's what it takes to get employees in certain areas. But you need to identify what those areas are. It doesn't need to be an arbitrary thing where I like Ricky, I'm going to give him 15 years. I don't like Hank, I'm only going to give him 10. It needs to be positions that the district agrees are hard to find areas if you want to give more than the 10 years. But once again, these are our recommendations. It's not meant to be written in stone. These are things that the district can work with and adjust as necessary. Next, please. If an employee comes from another school district, our practice has been to give them exact years of experience. If somebody comes in as a teacher assistant from a neighboring county with 19 years of experience, then we recommend it be at 19 years because it's been a like position with those same years of experience, as opposed to the marketplace where they may have been in a position that may not quite fit the position they're going to be in. In this case, it would be a like position. We like to see different levels for folks that are in the trade areas that take the initiative to go back and get licenses. It helps them from a pay standpoint, but it helps the district from a money standpoint, because if you don't have the licensed folks in place, you've got to pay a contractor to come in and sign off on some of your projects. If you have the right people hired in place, they can go ahead and sign off on that, and it saves you significant dollars, but it also gives a person a reason to want to stay because they know they can move up. So you'll see your recommendation for 3 levels of positions within those trade areas to give them an incentive to move their way up. The next bullet basically just summarizes all the classified positions that are in need of adjustment. And you've seen this. I think if COVID taught us one thing, the pandemic, is how much school systems rely on the classified employees. they've kind of been taken for granted in the past, but I think all of us now realize that what they're needed, that they're also needed to run the school system. They're not in the classroom. They are needed to help on an instructional day. We talked about eliminating the specialist and coordinator titles. We talked about increasing the supplement for principals, and also tying the central office administrator schedule into the principal scale. Next, please. Okay, so if you don't mind, if you've got your big report in front of you, if you have access to it, what I'd like to do is look at the salary schedules that we're recommending for just a few minutes, and then we can take some questions, but I think it's on page 39. It's either 38 or 39. I don't know if I'm off by one with y'all or not. Let me see. And this won't be on a slide, so I apologize. Is there so many pages to the
It's page 39.
Okay, page 39, please. This is what the scale would look like, and there's about 3 or 4 pages that look the same. The only difference across the top is you have different grades. But if you'll give me just a minute, I'll explain, and then we'll go back a page to show how the position would fit on here. 26, if you look at the very first number on the left-hand column under 55, grade 55, it shows $2,600. That's equivalent to $15 an hour. Okay, so effective July 1, of course, you already had a living wage in place, but effective July 1 across the state, school systems have to pay $15 an hour as a minimum wage. So that's what we're building off of. Okay, well, right now on your schedule 55, and you'll get more details from Rhonda as you go in the next couple of weeks as you go through your work group and so forth, but you'll see that you've got quite a few employees that are making the $15 an hour. And right now your $15 an hour includes the 7% supplement. So that's another decision that you as a system will have to make. Does the $15 an hour, do you want the inclusive or exclusive of the local supplement? Our scale, the state's going to be looking at that person making $15 an hour, and it can be done either way. So the scale is going to show $15. So that's why you see 2,600 up there. I think you'll see 24 something maybe, or on your actual internal scale. And then when you add the supplement to it, it gets up to 2,600. But for our purposes, we started off with the 2,600. Then if you add 1.5% to that for the first year or the first step, it goes to 2,639. Well, you pay your employees twice a month. So we went ahead and showed a second column that would show the employees how much they would make each pay period. So all it is just the first column divided by 2. And so if you were to go through the next 3 pages, I think you would see the same logic. You would just see different numbers, because as you go up from left to right, the grades are going to increase. If we can go back a page, actually 2 pages. This is our, I call it hierarchy for lack of a better term, how employees would be placed from lowest grade to highest grade. And once again, this is flexible. As a district, you may say, we obviously didn't get to talk to everybody. We're basing it on titles. There may be a title of a position here that has more responsibility than what the title indicates, and you think that position should be classified higher. But the custodian and the school food service worker would start off at that schedule we were just looking at, grade 55. If they've got 15 years experience, they would go to step 15. So but you go all the way down. If you go through that full 2 pages, it ranges all the way from a custodian to the highest graded position we had was your network analyst. And so it's not unusual to see a district take the recommendation and tweak it, but I think for the most part, you'll probably keep most of the recommendation that we have in there, at least from a hierarchical standpoint. You may change the salaries a little bit, but for the most part, the grades should be pretty much in the order of that you normally would see for these types of positions. Any questions on that? Okay, let's go to the principal salary scale. which would be on page 44. If you go and look at the detail in the report, I mentioned that there were 3 districts that pay significantly higher principal supplement. And so what we tried to do was take some of what they're doing and put that into what you could possibly do in Orange County. And so if we look at the principal, let's look at the very first section there, the principal for an elementary school, with 200 to 400 students. Right now, they get $1,000 per month. What we're recommending is that they get a 17.5% percentage of their base salary, because that base is going to change well, I shouldn't say change every year. If the state gives raises, the base salary for the principal will change. And so that percentage of the local supplement would also change with it. The last column is the one I want to spend some time on. One of the districts that you compete against pays a longevity factor based on experience to its principals. Okay, they pay more than what we're recommending here. Not that we don't think they deserve it. We were just trying to make it somewhat more affordable. But you can raise, our recommendation was $70 per month for after 5 years of administrative experience. And so a person that's been in the principalship for 10, 15 years would obviously get additional money on top of the 17.5%. What that prevents is that brand new principal from making the same thing as that principal that's got 15 years experience. Okay, so it does give credit for experience in an administrative position. So once again, the $75 is flexible. The 5 years is flexible. You can start it from year 1, but this is just a recommendation that you can work off of and come up with your own if that's not what as much as you want to do, or if it's more than what you want to do. But that's the reason why a couple of your neighboring districts are paying more, is because they have built in a longevity factor into the principal salary schedule. A couple minor changes. Well, let's go ahead and talk about middle school. If you go down 2 more categories, 2 more columns, middle school, we put at 25% of the base salary, and comprehensive high schools, we put at 35%. I think we recognize the amount of time that's required at club activities, after school activities, and so forth at a high school. The last column is the one that's a little bit different. You have I call them a specialty high school, but I'm sure you use different terms there. But this is a high school, but it's not a comprehensive high school. And so we recommended that be paid at the middle school percentage, not at the comprehensive high school percentage. And if for some reason that salary is less than what the current person's making, of course, we would recommend you grandfather that person in. But we didn't look at that, go that far with it to see what that would entail. Okay, let's go to page 45. I mentioned earlier that we like to tie the central services salary schedule into the principal salary schedule. So what we did was took your certain administrative titles and put them into the same position as principals at certain levels. So you'll see the certified coordinators at the elementary level. Assistant director is at I think the bigger of the 2 elementary levels, and so forth down the line. But you can see there's a hierarchy there, or a correlation between them and the principal scale, so that a principal can move up to central services and not take a cut in pay. And in some cases, they would obviously get an increase, because if you had an elementary principal that you wanted to bring into the central services as an executive director, obviously their supplement's going to go higher than what they're currently getting, and they would have an increase, and there'd be an incentive for them to come to central services. Now, the way we did these scales, you could, if you just wanted to keep principal salaries and central services supplements the same, you could just do the local base differential. The part that's going to be a little bit different, or it costs a little bit more money, is that second, or is the last column, the local longevity addition. But once again, that's to be competitive with your neighboring districts as it comes into play with principals. And so that's pretty much, I think that's it. Yep. that's a quick overview of the presentation. You'll see a lot of data in the big report. You'll see the salaries for the different classifications that we looked at, but the recommendations, observations, and findings is the bottom line of all that we looked at. And so at this point, I'll turn it back to Dr. Felder or Rhonda or the Chairman Doyle, whoever needs to take over at this point, but see if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hurd and Ms. Eisenhower, Mr. Lopes. This is incredibly, just incredible information for us to have. Ms. Rath, are you fielding? I know we have a whole timeline of how we're going to process this as a board. Are there questions that we're planning on fielding tonight, or I know board members submitted questions. Are those for us to use in later sessions?
So the questions that the board has submitted are a little bit more granular in regards to where we'll be looking at cost and how our staff actually align in certain categories. But we do want to allow the board, if there's any questions surrounding how Hill Consultants performed this study, or if there's any other questions for clarity surrounding that, now would be the time to ask those.
Okay. Do any board members have questions in that vein? And I may or may not be able to see you all at the same time. It looks like Will does. You want to go first, Will?
Yes, thank you. So I did submit questions that are much more detailed, as Rhonda mentioned, but one of the questions I had is, as you were looking across the different, categories and people, and, one of the things that really stuck out to me is we have a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. And I'll just pick one, for example. So let's just say data managers or bookkeepers, because they're in the same kind of category. It's not obvious when you look at this, or other districts, for example, Alamance, Chapel Hill, Durham, are their majority of their staff following in the maximum at, as they progress, they've got longer people in those jobs and they're at the top of the scale, or are they all at the bottom of the scale? A lot of this data was hard for me to consume without the context of saying, okay, I see what they're paying and what we're paying, but is our problem not that our scale is wrong, but our people are all at the minimum and they should be at the maximum, and the maximum should be more, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, and you summarized it just right. That's the problem. The problem is not the scale, it's the placement on the scale because of the freeze. And so what's going to happen is the maximums will probably change for those categories of employees. But the main thing will be even somebody who's not at the maximum, somebody has 10, 12 years of experience will move up 10 or 12 steps because they've been frozen. And we don't know, you're correct, we don't know what people are making in other districts. We've worked with some districts that were able to give increases after the recession. They kind of decompressed their scales. We've had others that have as many as 50 steps. And so I would say more districts are in your situation with the compressed scales. The difference is you had already gone to the minimum of $15 an hour, and none of the other districts that we worked with have done that. So you've taken care of part of the problem, but not the compression issue. But yes, you are correct. The maximums will probably change and your employees will move up the scale without us knowing how much that they're actually making in some of those other districts.
And just one other question around that. Some of the numbers I looked at doesn't appear to have all compensation in it. It seemed like it was just the state numbers. Is that true?
It should be all of it, unless your local scale that you've developed does not have the local supplement in it. But the other salaried information should, where we actually compared salaries, it probably is their base salary, but Rhonda may have to answer that one. I'm not sure. I don't think Rhonda
It should be base salary. It will not include supplement because not every district can offer supplement, and the local supplement is what varies from district to district. So it will include just the base salary.
Okay. And then last question on this, and I'll jump back and let any other board member ask questions. So for example, our social workers and master pay, for example, those pay scales that are shown are just the standard pay scale. We're not calculating in people that may be in the master's pay or not, correct?
Well, we didn't, the social worker would be a certified employee. And so the state determines their salary. So the only other increase they get is what you pay them. Their supplement's quite a bit higher than the classified, but yes, the state gives a certified salary. You cannot use any more state dollars than what they will allow for that. And then the difference is what you pay as a supplement.
Okay, I'll relinquish to let other board members ask.
Okay, thanks, Will. Sarah?
One thing I wanted to say out loud that came up in the budget committee meeting, just for anybody listening out there, is the dollar cost of this is going to be millions of dollars, and it's a lot of money to find. Like, I think we've sort of alluded to that, but I think it's just in terms of and why we need to incorporate it in the budget conversations with the commissioners. But I think that's I thought I just wanted to say that out loud for any staff members who might be listening about the scale of the money that we need to find, even if we're not getting into specifics. I guess it's sort of a follow-up to Will's question, which I had also wondered about specifically about the principal comparisons to other districts. And I had wondered how much of those average differences might be years of experience or something like that. Do you have any sense, although knowing that like years of experience are only really sort of solved in a local supplement, maybe that isn't a factor, but is it like size of schools or do all those things come into play too, or is it more straight comparison?
Only locally. The only thing that comes into play from a state standpoint is the ADM. And so whatever factors you want to include when you're doing your supplement, you can do. Normally you'll see a difference in the grade level supplement. And so the experience factor, not a lot of districts use that. And so that's why your surrounding districts are so high. There's only probably a handful of districts that take that into consideration. And so when you look at the state averages for principal supplements, you're doing very well. But if your goal is to compete with your neighbors, it would need to be even higher. And that's where the experience factor would come in. Right now, it's not a factor. It's just a flat dollar amount. And so if you did want to get closer, that's where the experience would come in. But I would say 95% of the districts do not even consider experience in their local supplement.
Well, I really like that piece of it for what it's worth. I know we'll get into the details, but I really think we should be incentivizing principals to stay in the principalship. So
I think what a lot of districts have done, once we made our reports to the boards, and the board has time to really kind of look at what we're presenting and our observations and recommendations, is to come up with a amount of money. As you mentioned, it could be millions of dollars and will be, to alleviate 13 years worth of frozen salaries, the inequities there, but to come up with a plan and present to the county commissioners. And we've had some districts to get a dedicated pool of funds to alleviate some of the inequities over time. And you didn't get in this mess, for lack of a better term, as far as the frozen salaries are concerned, overnight, and you won't get out overnight either, as you're pointing out. So coming up with some priorities, and a lot of times the classified employees, when they hear that there is in fact a plan and a multi-year arrangement, that kind of calms the waters, for lack of a better term, as far as folks knowing that, hey, the board does realize that we have some inequities here and it's going to be addressed over time. But, that we sensed a lot of frustration in your classified staff the amount of inequities that have occurred over years with new hires coming in. And that's not uncommon. I mean, again, we've done over 60 of these, over 60 of the 115 LEAs just within North Carolina. We've done these same surveys and studies, and we've actually performed them in other states also. In fact, just recently, we were contacted by 2 school districts that found out we were doing these studies from South Carolina, wanting us to come down, which, we're very limited in our capacity of being able to do the type of work that we do. So again, a multi-year approach is the way to go about addressing this. And you have to keep in mind what Rhonda said at the outset, budgeting recurring expenses out of a fund balance is not an option. It's got to be a recurring source of money. Now, and one of the things we found out is in a lot of the studies that we've done is in talking to cities and counties that they have been doing this over the last several years. They basically looked at the frozen steps that they had, and a lot of them basically have already put in place a plan to alleviate those. And a lot of cities and counties have not been frozen over the years. They don't have quite the compression that we have in school districts.
Just to throw in a little side note, I think one thing that would be helpful, I know oftentimes county commissioners and school system boards don't see eye to eye, but I think one thing that y'all could all agree on is that the state has pushed this issue down to the local level. And if somehow it was an agenda item, a high legislative priority at the state level, if the County Commissioner Association and the School Board Association would put the compression issue, get away from the $13 or $15, everybody being excited about that. Once again, that just helped a certain number of employees. But I think both parties could agree that the compression issue is a bigger issue that needs to be addressed. And if both bodies could agree on that, it might carry some weight.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Okay, Vice Chair Stevens, and then Ms. Hauser.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, was Bonnie before me?
Go ahead, Brenda.
Oh, okay. All right. So we like to look at Chatham and Alamance a lot, when we are comparing. And I just noticed that in this grid, there's a lot of NAs in the Chatham boxes. Help me understand why that is.
Some districts are more forthcoming on providing information than others. And so we weren't able to get the information that we needed from them as easily as we were from others. And so in some cases, we were able to get information from other databases, but not from them directly.
Well, that doesn't seem right.
Bonnie?
So thank you. First, I wanted to thank you for highlighting the salary issues on our school administrative positions, the bookkeepers, the data managers, the secretaries. It's been a high priority for us. So really, really appreciate you highlighting that. And the trades was also really interesting for us to look at. I had a couple of questions. One is, you don't have to answer it, and I don't need the technical answer, but I was surprised when you said the salaries in the scale. Did I hear you say that it did not include the supplement, and the salaries that we compared did not include the supplement? Did I hear that?
You heard correctly. Supplement is not included because that varies from district to district, and there are districts in the state who are not able to offer a local supplement.
But so when we pay people, though, one of when I think of the lever that we have as a board and as a district, it's the supplement. However, we're going to make these numbers work. It's by manipulating the supplement because the state salaries are set by the state. Correct?
That's correct. And so one of the decisions that you'll have to make as a system is whether you want that 7% to be part of the $15 an hour beginning point, or do you want to add that to the $15 beginning point?
Okay.
In other words, technically you would be okay keeping it at $15 an hour and saying that 7% of that is a supplement and the $14 and something is the salary for a total salary of $15 because you pay it monthly. Or are you going to say $15 an hour and then add 7% on top of it? So you do have some flexibility there, but from our standpoint, we just put in the $2,600 at $15 an hour as the beginning point.
Got it. For us, I think when we compare ourselves to other districts, the supplement is going to make a difference. So it's going to underestimate us in some cases, overestimate us in others. So it makes it. Second question is this 42 years, which we use today, and the 30 years, and the 13 steps is the state, correct? And or 30 steps and 42 steps. Is that just for the supplement, or is that for the total salary? Because I think we're going to have to like buy Rhonda lots of presents to figure this out.
That's the total number of steps, which equates to usually to years of experience. And so the base salary is based on the 42 years, or whatever their monthly salary is. That's what you base the 7% supplement on. But the 42 years, you are correct, is the years of experience that an employee would need to get to the top of the scale.
So you're suggesting we go from 42 to 30, and then we have to convert that to what that means in terms of base plus supplement.
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
So one last question. This is really an impression. You've done this extensive review for us. If you point out that our per pupil allocation is substantially higher than all our peer counties, yet some are paying people more than we are. And I was wondering why, if you had any impressions about where's it going? Where's the money going if it's not going to salaries? Is there just something kind of weird there? Just curious.
I hate to speculate because we didn't really look at your budget or your actual expenditures or whatever. And so I'd hate to guess because I'd probably be wrong, but it was usually, our biggest expense in any system, whether you're spending more or less money, is obviously people. And so it would just have to be where's the, which there could be certain categories of employees that you have a higher number of people than others. I don't know, but yeah, without looking at it in detail, I'd hate to guess what the reason is.
I would wonder if I could interject here, if a component could be where we may vary by having more people that are paid off of our local budget than some of our surrounding districts, i.e. we may have we just have more positions. I can't think of an example to use that I don't want to spike fear or panic in anyone. I just wanted to use an example of, how we may have a certain position. Let's say that we have one in every elementary school. The districts that we were compared against do not, or possibly do not have that. And so that would be a difference in where we have more money in sense going to more salaries. So I guess we have the same pot that we're spreading over more people, where other districts could have the same pot, they're spreading it over less people, so they're able to give more competitive salaries, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, almost like it's like a teacher to student ratio, but it could be other staff to student ratio.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Other board members with questions, and Bonnie might still have a question too.
No, I think that's it.
Well, this is wonderful. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just trying to understand the idea of the schedules and then the idea of the local supplement. I really liked the suggestion that we put our schedules on the website where they're easy to understand, just that kind of thing. Do districts ever just sort of wrap the supplement into the schedule? There's sort of assumptions there, and they don't say like, and we give this extra supplement, but the actual dollars that people are earning, fundamentally, it's all a supplement over what the state's paying.
That's all over the board. Some districts pay supplements twice a year, others included in the salary. We've seen it in many different ways, depending on the district.
And y'all don't have an opinion about which one of those is more effective for?
Well, it really depends on, a lot of times, what the classified employees in the feedback sessions, what they prefer. And of course, a lot of times you find divisions in there. The bus drivers, for example, may want theirs every month, whereas, others, trades folks may want like a supplement in November and one in May or June. I think Durham next door pays theirs in May and June. November and May. So anyway, it just depends on what the policies are and what it looks like.
A lot of options. Thank you.
Yes, years ago, Orange County Schools did pay the supplement twice a year. No, actually, they paid it once a year. Let me take that back. They paid it once a year in November, right before Thanksgiving. Whenever we implemented the semi-monthly payroll schedule, it was determined at that time that it was more beneficial for the employee to receive that supplement each month. And so at that time, policy was changed where supplement was then given monthly versus only one time a year.
Well, this is incredibly informative, and I'm starting to think we're at the end of board member questions, but I think I see Will. Will has another one.
Yeah, I just have one more. So as we think about this, how does this affect the overall benefits? Like what we have to contribute into the state as we do these adjustments? We would have to adjust for benefits as well, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Atherton, because our benefits are a percentage of the salary. So the retirement as well as the employer portion of the FICA is a percentage of base salary. So that will be a component of the cost. And right now, retirement, the portion that Orange County Schools pays is 24.10%, and FICA is 7.65%.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again for this presentation to everyone from the Hill Group. Dr. Felder, do you have any comments that you want to make?
Most certainly do. Thank you, Chair Doyle. I want to personally thank the board for approving, Ms. Rath for shepherding, and the Hill Group consultants for conducting this long overdue salary study of classified staff who are valued and needed to successfully operate this school district. To be clear, like our certified staff, I know they would agree with this, our classified staff are essential to the successful operation of our district. We cannot, I repeat, absolutely cannot successfully operate the school district without them. Lastly, while as noted by the Hill Group, we didn't get into this situation overnight and will not get out of it overnight, I am thankful and encouraged that this salary study will be leveraged to alleviate inequities and enhance the district's salary structure for our classified staff. So thank you all.
We thank you also.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you again. And thank you, Ms. Rath, for the collaboration and showing us how that timeline is going to work. I think that is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
We have another information item. Dr. Felder, would you like me to welcome Mr. Abilene and Mr. Mincy, or do you have anything you'd like to say before we start on the easement request?
No, you're welcome to welcome Mr. Abilene, as he will be joined by Ms. Marie Strandwitz, Utilities Director with the town of Hillsborough. So take it away.
All righty, so we've got a few background slides here. We appreciate the board's comments when we brought this back in December to seek additional clarification and information on this project. And I want to thank Marie for being here this evening and providing background and supplemental information, and you'll be able to see some of that this evening. There's for the public or anyone that's listening or watching, there's more details certainly in the abstract and materials that are listed online that we'll be able to cover or be able to show on the screen this evening. So you can go to the next slide. Just to give a little bit about this, the background of this project, the town of Hillsborough was looking to relocate a 70s era pumping station out of the floodway. The new pump station would be an underground system, and Marie will talk a little bit more about that. identified this critical infrastructure that not only would serve the town, but serves the school. And since we do have accessibility to existing sewer systems and are close to the wastewater treatment plant, the town looked at the property at River Park Elementary School, and the school district, although we own approximately 20 acres of the area at the school, not all of that is usable, what we would consider school operations on a daily basis, because it is and does slope down into the floodway. It stays quite wet, and there's little use of actually having school-age children back towards the river on a daily basis. And so we do have some trails, and there are some areas that is used by the school, but this would be located out of that general area that we would consider what we use on a daily basis and what we maintain back into the natural areas. And then, as we discussed last month, these projects typically happen behind the scenes, but the board felt it was important that we have full transparency on the project, not only making sure that we were able to answer and bring back additional clarifications and questions on the project, but give an opportunity for the school and the stakeholders at the school with the parents an opportunity to provide feedback. We did, through the principals, send information out to the parents about this project last week and at the end of last week, and that survey is still open at this time with project information, the background information that the board has, and then also a survey for any additional comments or feedback on the project and an opportunity to visit the site as well. To date, I checked just prior to the board meeting this evening, we did not have any comments to that survey at this time. Next slide. Again, there is a special access area that would be utilized for the pump station once it's in place, and the weekly maintenance or ongoing maintenance of this that the town would have access through, and it would not be through the school property. And we've got a map that illustrates how the access would go. We do not have or anticipate or have any concerns that with this project impacting the school hours or operations. There's not going to be any noise from it. Again, it would help us with the private sewer line that we currently maintain at the rear of the school, because right now we're maintaining it all the way down the line. Once the pump station, if it were approved and it were installed, we would just be maintaining from the school to the pump station. And again, there's no cost to this project to the school district. The town has applied for grants for this through FEMA. Next slide. And here's an overview of the project. And Marie, I'll turn it over to you if you want to give a little more information about what's on the screen. So thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. So the map explains where the existing sewer line is. It's the green line, and the school's sewer is in the red area that I outlined. We are proposing to put a new pumping station in the blue outlined area, which is the corner of the school parcel. If anyone has been back there, it is down a significant slope in a wooded area. And so we feel like it's out of the way, but that area is right outside the edge of the floodplain. The town has applied for some FEMA grant funding to relocate the station out of the floodplain. So we really didn't have any other options without significant reworking of the existing sewers, which are shown in green at the bottom, that go towards the existing river pumping station. I think the fact sheet that you have explains generally what we're looking to do. I'm happy to answer more specific questions, but we're at the preliminary phases of this project. So we wanted to get that in front of you for consideration as we move forward. The timeline is probably more stretched out than I had put in the fact sheet. We will not find out if we've received the funding until summer. If we receive the funding, then we have to go through design. We have to do some studies of the area. Obviously, we would need to determine exactly how much space we would need, survey the area, talk to you about the terms of the purchase, which I think is the suggested method. So, and then get to permitting and construction. So we are looking at this project actually breaking ground, I would guess probably not for another year and a half. We have to spend any grant funds received by the end of 2025. So that is our current time frame for the project.
And so the board has a couple options when it comes to this project. One is to just grant an easement of the parcel of land, still retain ownership, and allow the town to construct the pump station on the property. The second, which is what the administration would recommend, which would be the board declare that area surplus, and we would go through the process of moving the property off of our usable space and declaring it surplus, offering it to the town, and we would have a market value for that. The town would, we would go through the survey process, and then we also would be required to offer the parcel to the Board of County Commissioners because that's a general statute requirement for property, real property that we would be disposing of. Part of the reason, I recommended that we do a land transfer of this is because of the location, one, based on just the area that was described and it just being out of the floodplain and not in usable space that we would build on or utilize. There's already existing sewer line that runs through that area already. The second thing is so that the town retains responsibility for the pump station and any ongoing or long-term maintenance for the pump station or any issues that would result of the pump station operation on that parcel of land. And if we can go to the next slide, I think we've just got a couple graphics here. So this is the information sheet. It's a couple pages long. We thank Marie for that. And there are direct links to that within the presentation and online as well that has information on the project. And if you go to the last slide, just shows the, I think we probably eliminated it, but it just shows that along the access point of how the access would be. If you can back up one more slide for me. So if you look at the south of the map that you're seeing here coming from the left-hand side up to the blue shaped area, that is an existing sewer line that comes from Cameron Street. And that is how the town would access this to the rear of the property from the river along that sewer line. So I know that was one of the critical questions was, if this was constructed, how would they access it and how would they be getting to the property? It's completely along that existing sewer easement and not through the direct front of the school or through the school property. And so with that, I'll just turn it over to the board if you have any questions or need clarification. Again, Marie, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strandwitz, and thank you, Mr. Abele. Do we have any board members with questions? I can't actually see you yet, so.
Looks like Mr. Atherton does.
Go ahead, Will.
Thank you. So just a couple of questions. One is, how would the power and anything needed to run the station be run? I'm hoping that you're not going to tell me it's going to go straight through the school, through the woods to the back. Would it come through the back as well as part of this?
We have not gotten as far as to evaluate the path for utilities. I don't know where the poles are, but we do have power, obviously, at our treatment plant, which is right across the river, and we have it over to the existing river pumping station, which is further south. So there may be a way to reach it from there. And I know there's power along Burnside Drive.
Okay. The second question I had was, what's the approximate total size needed for this?
The space, the footprint?
Yeah, the footprint. Thank you.
The footprint. So the fact sheet that I gave you shows you our current Elizabeth Brady pumping station. That is going to be a similar size. That is about a little over an acre. Now we need to add the access drive right up to the corner of the property and probably beside the station. So I'm thinking permanently it would be no more than an acre and a half max, but we're shooting for a minimal footprint. And then there would be some temporary construction easement requested just during the construction phase, which would be restored back to natural state or better.
Okay, thank you.
Bonnie, go ahead. You're muted, Bonnie.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for this presentation. I have, first of all, the most obvious question that you have to ask when you're dealing with wastewater treatment, and that's odors. Will there be odors from the lines or venting, or will everything be underground?
Everything will be underground except for manholes. There'll be hatches on the wet well that has the pumps in them. There'll be manholes leading up to the site. I'm trying to think if there's anything else above ground. Really, no, there shouldn't be anything above ground. It should be an entirely closed system except for when you open the hatch to the wet well. The site sits several feet below the school grounds. And I think we actually looked a little bit at the prevailing winds, and I believe they go to the northeast. But that's something that'll be evaluated during design. And we have some of our stations right now have odor control, which is like a chemical feed, but we rarely use them because we really don't receive odor complaints. We don't even receive odor complaints from the wastewater plant that sits, right across the river south of the school.
I was thinking about the odors, like if you walk along the river walk, there's those vents along the river walk, and sometimes odors come out of there. That's kind of what was.
That is true. The river walk, the reason those manholes are sitting so high above ground and have vents is because they are in the floodplain. The ones that would be on the school site would not be that high.
So that would mitigate the odor, so there'd be less odors because they're buried. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And just on and it's not a question to answer, but I just want to throw a thought out. And that's, we have many out of town campuses that are paying out of town sewer rates to Hillsborough, and wondering if that's something we could look at if we do this deal, if that's possibly a negotiating point to bring those on an in-town rate. So just
I would love to hear everyone's thoughts on that as we move through the process.
Thank you.
We'll certainly consider all suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Bonnie. Other board members with questions?
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Well, I think we're actually just receiving this information.
Oh, I thought we were voting tonight.
Okay, yeah, nope. Will has another question.
Yeah, I think the form is open till the 28th for parents to submit any feedback. But the only other question I had is, are there other sites being considered besides this, or is this the one y'all believe is the site that makes the most sense? I've heard anecdotally there's 2 other sites besides this.
There was a conceptual plan evaluated. The other two sites, the first one was at the corner of Burnside and Cameron. And those lots, that corner has been sitting vacant for many years. And right when we received our report back that used that location as a potential site, the owner decided to sell it, and there's a house being built on that parcel right now. So what are the odds? The other site was we were trying to get the sewer across the river to our Elizabeth Brady pumping station, which is on Elizabeth Brady Road near the Speedway entrance. And that would require piping almost 60 feet deep. And that just was not a feasible option by the time we took it there.
Okay, I just wanted to also just thank our staff and the town staff for putting together the FAQs and giving us some time to look at it. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your presentation. And I agree, it's really helpful that this came back as an information item so we could spend some more time looking at different aspects of this. I think we're ready, Dr. Felder, to move on to our discussion and action.
Indeed, we are, Chair Doyle. And so I just want to say thank you so much to Ms. Strandwitz for joining us tonight, and to Mr. Aberle, who won't be going too far, as he will be facilitating this next agenda item on the discussion of transportation and the lottery process at Hillsborough Elementary School, which the board will be asked to take action on. So Mr. Aberle will be joined by the school's principal, Mrs. Christine Kreider. And so at this time, Mr. Aberle and Mrs. Kreider, take it away.
All right, thank you all very much. So we're wanted to bring back information to you this evening. Obviously, the board has, heard and we discussed previously in reference to Hillsborough Elementary School being a choice program, and how are we promoting not only the school, but keeping the school success continuing, but also bringing back a plan that would help create a diversity at the school that mirrors that of the school district. And so there are several components to that. We're glad to have Ms. Christine Kreider here, who's the principal, and she has been working with our team, and Catherine Mao, our student assignment specialist and technology coordinators, here this evening as well. And so the three of us are going to walk through what we believe are the critical components to success in reaching the board's goal for the 2022-2023 school year. And so, Ms. Kreider, we'll turn it over to you to give us the background on Hillsborough Elementary School and the efforts that are being made. Next slide, please.
Well, thank you so much. Well, good evening, everyone. First, I just want to say Hillsborough Elementary School, we are just a fun, caring, inclusive learning environment where families are valued and staff are valued and belong to our Dolphin Pod. As a community, we embrace diversity of all types, kind of as Mr. Gaddy eloquently described earlier. We believe strongly in the benefits of our year-round calendar, and we want to share those benefits with all members of our community, which is really the purpose of tonight's discussion. We take the fact that 100% of our families make the choice to come to HES, we take that responsibility very seriously and very dear to our hearts. Serving the community for 26 years, we have a wonderful school where we work to make sure all families and staff belong and are valued. And we recognize that some groups in our greater Orange community are not as well represented at HES as others. And we know our school only gets stronger when there are more voices and perspectives. The school-based equity team and our positive culture climate teams, they lead the work for teachers to engage students in grade appropriate, brave, not perfect conversations. I know some of you have tweeted out and retweeted some of those that we've posted. And we do that through morning meeting dialogue. And we have a common understanding of vocabulary around topics of belonging, respect, diversity, inclusivity, just to name a few, as one of our systematic ways that our community works to build student capacity to live this vision and these values that you see on the slide. As an administration, we provide authentic spaces for staff based on mutual respect and trust. And how do you build trust? You build relationships. And teachers can bring concerns, and we engage in that authentic dialogue.
Teachers have posted on social media about them feeling valued in our community. And we do this for teachers to set an example, and teachers do this for students. And we've made many efforts to recruit and retain a diverse student and staff population, and we want to share with the board and the community some of those efforts. Next slide, please. So our Hillsborough website, we have a special page dedicated just for prospective families, including all the application information, as well as our information brochures in both English and in Spanish that we've created for distribution as well as posting. We've held multiple bilingual in-person and virtual school tours starting in October through January. We have our recruitment efforts and brochures shared with staff and families to share and promote in person and on social media. And our families do a wonderful job with word of mouth sharing, and they are some of the best recruiters that we have. I can't tell you how many of prospective families share that they came to want to learn about Hillsborough because a neighbor has said something and has just really promoted the school. We've collaborated with our family liaisons to translate and promote in the community. Our school-based equity team makes systematic efforts to reach daycares, churches, other organizations in the community. And of course, the use of social media promotion. Thank you again for those of you who are retweeting out what we are posting on social media. We've also purchased some flags to install on the property to get the attention of folks in the area. And excited that we've formed some partnerships with community organizations. I know our my assistant principal and social worker this week are meeting again with the Family Success Alliance and sharing information about Hillsborough in the community. I know Orange County Schools advertised via Parent Academy sessions and on social media and on their website, as well as additional outreach by Orange County Schools. And the other piece of this, and most of this is about, prospective families, but we also need to talk about, our strong relationship building and treating staff well, because they're the ones that have really helped us do a lot of our recruiting for additional positions. And I do want to note that over the past few years, over 50% of our new hires were all staff of color. And I think that's notable as we look at our recruitment and marketing efforts. Next slide, please. So again, we know that some groups in our greater Orange community are not as well represented at Hillsborough Elementary. During school tours and when speaking with prospective families, we're often asked many questions about curriculum and the school in general, but sometimes it's about diversity that exists at the school, as they just want to know more, right? Additionally, we received many inquiries about transportation and programming during intersession. We have a great dolphin camp, and we want to make sure that that continues and is offered. And also having middle school year-round options. Just for example, last week we registered a new family from out of state, and the mother the first day completing registration asked about what the K-8 options were, to have for a year-round middle school. In working with families, we often need to provide assistance in understanding the process and the application. Sometimes the language in the application online is a little daunting for some folks. And so we provide a lot of one-on-one assistance where we can. And outreach needs to continue in helping families understand that while kindergarten registration begins in February, if you would like the option to attend one of our choice programs, that application starts in January. We always get calls in February and March from families that want to attend HES but have missed that application window. So just as a reminder to the greater community, anybody listening, those that are interested, all those choice programs, that application window is in January and will close on January 31st. It's also important to note that we have low student turnover, which is wonderful. And we have low staff turnover, which is, again, a great indicator for a great school. So therefore, it's really critically important that in order to increase the diversity of our demographics, we've got to increase the diversity of our applicant pool in order to make an impact on overall student demographics. And we would really welcome support and recruitment efforts, especially in groups that are not as highly represented. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Obley to talk about strategies and student assignment. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you. So the three priorities you'll hear more about this evening. One is the targeted outreach, how we utilize and look at student assignment when it comes to segments and where our students live as a group, as a whole, and how we can utilize that when we make priority decisions. Transportation, we've talked about that previously, and you saw on the earlier slide. Transportation is a barrier, and this board has made a focus that we address the transportation barrier, and we're working through the process. Although we are working on the nuances of exactly what that looks like, it's hard to have a transportation plan before we know the families and where they live and the locations wanting transportation, but we're doing everything we can to eliminate and address that barrier. And then the third is our application priorities, which we'll spend some time talking about this evening as well, but wanted to just really focus in on the 3 areas that we feel will be successful in reaching the goal of increasing the diversity at the school. Next slide. So just want to point out that we do have guiding regulations and policies, policy 4125. We do have a lottery process that is open to all the families and all the individuals applying to the district. And we do seat within our lotteries in district families before we seat out of district families. But we have our board goals, alleviating overcrowding and efficient use of our schools, balancing of school populations, giving a preference to siblings, trying to keep families together, especially fosters or other family situations, keeping the families together in the school assignments, and then providing an opportunity for all applicants to have at least some chance for a seat within the programs that we offer. Next slide. And our specific board policies are listed here. And I would say, although we didn't list it, we're also guided by U.S. Department of Education and federal regulations when it comes to school assignment and school assignment regulations as well. And so all of our assignment priorities and policies, we've worked through the firm with the board attorney over the past several years, and ensuring to make sure that as we make changes or updates to our policies, that we're not only within state, but we're meeting federal guidelines as well. Next slide. Few information items here about admission to Hillsborough. As Ms. Kreider said, we do not have an assigned school zone for Hillsborough Elementary School. So if you move into the district, no matter where you move into as an elementary student, you have an opportunity and can apply to go to Hillsborough Elementary School. There's not a set school zone or a school boundary based on where you're domiciled or where you've purchased a home or where you're living that automatically gets you assigned to Hillsborough Elementary School. It is strictly through the lottery process, and all of our applications for our choice schools, as Ms. Kreider said, the deadline is January 31st. It is earlier than the, as she mentioned, the kindergarten registration. And part of the reason it's earlier is several years ago, we had all of our applications at the same time closing. And there was a feedback from the community and the public that because the choice programs are so limited in the number of students that could attend those, to do those applications first, and then parents would be notified if they were accepted or not into the program. Then the regular discretionary application window opens for transfers coming up in February. And so if I don't get an opportunity to get into Hillsborough because there's limited spaces, then I still have an opportunity to request transfer to one of our other schools that may be open or have limited capacity. And so that's why this process starts in January. But I wanted to provide a little bit of rationale as to why we're so early with the choice programs. It's so those families get notified early on and they still have an opportunity to request a discretionary transfer if they don't get into the choice programs. Again, there's no school attendance zone, and we will run the lottery processes, planning on those around February 16th. And those are done not only with district staff, but staff from Ms. Kreider's school are all part of the lottery processes, and those are done electronically. As of January 20th, there are 92 applicants. We have 72 available seats in kindergarten, and we are limited based on class size numbers that are set by the General Assembly with the state for state class size, for individual class size and space at the school. And so we're limited to 72 seats, and that equates to 4 kindergarten classrooms with 16 students in each class as a base enrollment for the school. 28 of the applicants are siblings of returning students. 3 are children of employees at the school. And then there are a small number of seats after the first 3 priorities are indicated. And we'll talk more about the priorities, but returning students automatically get an option to come back to the school. Their siblings get an opportunity to come into the school, and then the children of employees that work at the school. So those are our first 3 priority levels. So that's what we're talking about here. So those first 3. And then after that, there's approximately 40 seats that would be available. And that's really what we're talking about, is the priorities of what the rankings would be for the next levels of students who would get eligibility for those seats. And again, you know, you discussed and asked us to bring back information. And the goal here was to widening that pool of applicants to Hillsborough Elementary School and to have a kindergarten class that more closely reflects the demographics of the district. Next slide. I want to talk just a minute about the transportation. And you've heard us mention probably previously that there's this 1.5-mile zone for transportation. With Hillsborough Elementary School, the map on the right is a nice concentric circle. It shows you what put a pin on the map and 1.5 miles around, and this would be a zone for which bus transportation would be provided. A couple things: we do not have designated walk zones within the town. We know for safe routes to schools, that is an area to be addressed, and we've looked at those plans and how we provide. So we do provide transportation services within the city zones to the schools, but the actual map on the left is actually how it works out with the transportation and transportation routing. So even within what was previously indicated as a limited area to provide transportation, it hasn't worked out feasibly to where we would expect individuals to be able to have routes and services. And so we recognize, even with limited transportation, it hasn't been providing the service to the school. And so we are not setting a limit. We have not set a zone. What we brought before the board was a plan that would indicate we would look for feasibility for any student, regardless of where they live, to try to establish routes and to have the availability of them to be transported to Hillsborough Elementary School, and not this 1.5-mile radius just around the school. Next slide. And so I'll turn it over to Catherine now. She's going to walk through the priorities and some of the analysis that was done as we looked at how do we expand our priorities and tweak the priorities for next year.
Thank you, everyone. I am really excited to present to you some of the different options that we came up with to diversify the applicant pool. This is so exciting, and usually people run screaming away from me when I talk about this, so I'm really eager to get into the nitty-gritty. As you know, there are very limited factors that we can use to legally assign students to schools, and we are definitely not permitted to use participation in the free and reduced price lunch program. So we needed to get together and come up with some different categories that would help expand the number of students that we could provide weight to. Next slide, please. The first area that we explored was academic achievement by planning segment. The district is divided into about 200 little planning segments, and it's used mostly for reassignment. However, every address in the district is assigned to a planning segment. We tied these planning segments to academic achievement. Looking at the third grade EOG scores for reading is a major indicator of student achievement. We looked at the year 2019, which was the last round of testing before COVID. We were able to calculate the average achievement for each planning segment. And we identified about 80 planning segments where the average achievement was below 2.5. During 2019, that represented about 190 students. It's of course different each year, but by targeting those students with a laser focus and making sure those that are most in need of a year-round program have a higher weight, we think that we'd be able to help achieve this goal. Next slide, please. Another way to look at it was to include Title I school zones, or students who reside in Title I school zones, to give them added priority. However, there were a couple issues with this. First of all, a school zone is much bigger than a planning segment. And if you looked at the 4 schools that are Title I, we would be giving preference to 66.5% of our students. And that's just not what we felt you were asking us to do. So this is not a method that we're recommending. However, it is interesting to look at. Next slide, please. The third thing we looked at was overcrowded schools, looking at the projections for the students who are expected to be enrolled there next year. Normally, this is a great way to ease overcrowding and make sure that we don't have any particular school that's bursting at the seams. This year, we don't have any schools that are over that 1.06% that the SAPFO agreement requires for consideration of a new school. However, we decided or determined that Evelyn Cheeks and River Park will be very close to our overcapacity. And so those are 2 options that we can use. This is going to represent 43.9% of our students. So it's a much smaller number than the Title I students. And so it's a priority that we thought would be useful. Next slide, please. We've talked about the bus transportation. And so now I'm going to tell you about the different priorities and the order in which we will apply them to the applicant pool. Next slide, please. So our first priority is returning students, and that has been the case for years. Students who are already at the school will have a chance to return. For the upcoming school year only, we're recommending that students who were at Hillsborough but had to attend the online academy and want to come back be given the same priority as the rest of the returning students. And this is just going to be for 1 year only. The next priority is the students who are new with a returning sibling. So these are those case siblings that Patrick was talking about. We have as our third weighted priority children of a Hillsborough Elementary employee. Next, we recommended bumping up the planning segments with achievement at or below 2.5. We figure that we can help diversify that pool by offering higher weight to that than the next priority, which is students who are domiciled in a planning segment assigned to an overcapacity school. The next pool that we would have is students who are domiciled in the district but don't meet any of those other categories. And then finally, out-of-district students who are accepted for discretionary admission with the payment of tuition.
And I will just add to that, that's after the wait list and after the students in district have been exhausted, and there's just no other students that have applied or waiting to get into the school, then the district has offered and allowed out-of-district families to apply with the payment of tuition.
Yeah, that traditionally is for the older students, maybe there will be a seat available in a 4th or a 5th grade situation, but rarely in kindergarten. Okay, next slide, please. In the future, we are eager to explore using poverty level segment indicators to assign students to schools for reassignment and for Hillsborough. This is a really exciting new idea that has been described in the report linked below, the last bullet in a report from the Department of Education and the US Census Bureau. And it takes very, very specific laser focused poverty banding and applies it geographically to help us determine exactly the segments that are most in need of some special weighting. What's also exciting about it is that we can then use information from the census and from Davis demographics to do some forecasting and to do some future planning. It is a really cool option that I can't wait to learn more about, and it's something that we just are not ready to apply this year.
And so there's other options as well, as Catherine mentioned. Even if we don't apply it with the weighting process, we'll have the information because it's very useful as we go through the reassignment process. As you heard earlier, I think the number from Orange County, the household median family income in the county was $104,000 or so, which included Chapel Hill. Well, what this allows us to do is to be able to narrow that down. Where do we have individual planning segments where the poverty level is much lower than that medium income, and be able to find those exact zones and then be able to do targeted outreach or to utilize that as we're doing the reassignment processes so that we're diversifying our schools in the planning process. Next slide. And so, bringing us to the recommendations, as Catherine said, the first 3 items on the list have been typically and historically what the school district has utilized for the assignment priorities for the lotteries. At Hillsborough Elementary School, we're recommending the addition of number 4, which is a 2.5 academic planning segment, that those individuals who apply from those segments be seated at the 4th level. And then at the 5th level would be the overcapacity schools. We're using 98%, obviously 100% is at capacity. When we talk about open, limited, or closed capacity schools, we're really closing schools prior to getting to 100%. And so we recommended the 98 percentile here, but the board certainly could say, that's 100%, or the board could say that's, we want to back that down to 95%. Overcrowding and how much space we leave for families that move into the district. But there is a concern, especially with K-3 class sizes, when we have students that move in, being able to seat students who live in a particular school zone. If you're over capacity at that grade level for the individual class size or at the district, we would be required to correct that, whether that's add a teacher, add a mobile unit, et cetera. And so this is another opportunity for us to reduce some of the crowding at the schools without the additional cost of additional teachers or mobile units, et cetera, in order to ease some of the crowding that may be anticipated. Number 6 is, again, the students, any other students in district that apply. And then 7 is any students that are out of district. And I think also attached to your report was the historical wait list. And so these are the recommendations that is the item that is for the vote this evening that we've recommended. But before we get to that, I know we haven't given you an opportunity to ask questions and clarify, so I'll just pause there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abele and Ms. Mao and Mrs. Kreider. This has been really helpful. I appreciate these new approaches that we're implementing and considering for improving our equity lens. Board members with questions. Sarah and then Bonnie.
Yes, and I'm also excited, Ms. Mal, for the things you spoke about in future in looking at poverty bands and planning segments. So look forward to hearing more about that. I really appreciate the thoroughness of trying to consider all the different options here. And I really like the idea of the priority order that you're proposing. My only question is around those overcapacity schools and what the potential impact there is. I imagine it's really hard to project how many students might take up seats in that category above. But I mean, in terms of how many of the kindergartners maybe have come from those overcapacity schools in the past, like, are we talking, do you have any sense of what the size of the impact might be? Because I do know, I mean, River Park and New Hope, although I saw New Hope was lower this year, I mean, they both have mobile units already, so are we talking about potentially having to add mobile units? Do you have any sense of that?
So a couple of things. One, historically, there were practices and lottery processes that were different prior to us having the policies and regulations that are in place now. And so trying to compare kindergarten enrollments from different zones several years ago may be difficult. We can say, and certainly can go back and look at the breakdown of the students and at what schools those students came from. But we do know the percentages have changed based on the number of students applying from different zones. And we looked at previously, when I was in the district, actually setting caps to say, no more than 5% or 10% of a student population can come out of a school at one time. Because, at the same time, we're trying to attract students to Hillsborough. We don't want to cause, a massive amount of students to shift or to move at one time. That hasn't been the case yet under these new policies the last several years, but we can certainly, I guess we would need to dive back through the data from, 3 years or so ago and look at the breakdown of the students and where they came from. Or which, not where they really came from, because some of them are kindergarten students, so they really haven't come from anywhere yet. So, but where they would have gone to, so.
Yeah, and I know, and we're looking for action from us tonight. So I know that I guess it would be helpful to know, Mr. Abley, like, you're comfortable making these recommendations if we're going to have to, like, mobile units cost a significant amount of money. So if
yeah, we're going to talk with our capital improvement plans. I mean, mobile units are going to be in our future. And I'll say it tonight, just for the fact of the amount of facility construction that we're going to be trying to accomplish over the next couple of years, and trying to do that while schools are in session. We will need to utilize mobile units or a reassignment plan, or, as Catherine worked with me in another district, spot reassignments or other ways to ease crowding on a school campus. This is certainly one way to do it, is through the choice program. But at the level that it's at, as we said, from 72 slots down to 40 slots, by the time we get to the 5th band, I'm not sure how many slots will actually be available for overcrowding. We did feel that academic performance and the academic performance indicators, based on what we know long-term for students and their academic achievement level, outweigh the overcrowding priority level at this time, knowing that we have other tools to ease overcrowding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bonnie was next.
Yeah, so I have just a couple of questions and very interesting information. I'd love to talk more about the reassignment numbers and how that works. I was told that Expedition actually has had really good success using the poverty level indicators in their lottery. So for whatever that's worth. First of all, you've presented some numbers to us that say 92 people have applied. We have 72 seats. 30 of them are going to be filled by returning students or families or students have employees. So we have 40 seats left and 60 applicants. So the first question is, of the applicants that we have, do we know how many fall into the criteria that we're proposing? And then secondly, are we proposing to open up, the application deadline ends this week, right? Or in a week? Are we proposing to open it up, or how are we going to get these people to apply, or have they?
So to your first question, no, we have not. And we typically don't dive into looking at the data and looking at the applicants prior to making decisions. It just keeps us neutral and unbiased to the processes as we're making, especially as we're making recommendations this evening. So we have not, at least we have, I know Catherine and I have not looked at the data and broken down the data of the applicants in the applicant pool. As far as the deadline, that is has been with policy. The administration sets the deadlines and sets the application time period. If the board feels that there needs to be an additional time to the application period, we've done it in the past for other extenuating circumstances, would be comfortable if the board recommends another week or another 10 days if you want to extend the application period. But again, we're not seeing a major concern right now or hearing feedback that the application window is closing. I know there is additional outreach that the district's doing as well to remind families that the application deadline is approaching and that the applications are due prior to January 31st. And it has been consistent with that application deadline probably for 5 years now. So it is a deadline that has been published previously as well.
Okay, well, it begs the question about, we have a process, we have applicants, are we going to meet how do we meet our objectives? So that question's out there. It's kind of a sidestep on space. Hillsborough has been a really, and Ms. Carter, thank you so much for creating a great school for us and such a desirable place for us. And I was thrilled that you touched on all the questions about staff diversity. It's not just transportation, staff diversity, it's the intercession programs and the middle school year round. That are the things that I hear parents are asking for. There is some additional space in the building. I think it's the space that Kidscope had. And I wondered if we're considering expanding the space in the school, either for expanding the enrollment or possibly beginning to add a middle school option. So is that something that we could do to expand the capacity? And there becomes this overarching, and my third question is this overarching question about year round is, have we made the case, is there a case that we need to make better that year round is a program that serves certain students in certain ways? Because it's, I'm a big fan of it, but I think there's, and of course, if you ask any ATS parent, they'll tell you there's nothing like it. But, and there's arguments, but I wonder if we've made the case, if we've done the research, if this is a choice program that we want to expand in that space and possibly into other schools. So those are my other questions.
I'll dive into the facility question because I think I can best answer that one. There has been no discussion that I recall or have been part of as far as expanding grade levels or additional students on the Hillsborough campus with middle school. I think that would be very difficult with the programming, the space profiles and the core facilities, media center, gymnasium. You talk about specials and wheel classes in middle school level, the cafeteria, the parking. I'm not seeing where even in the limited space in the learning center that we would have to be able to expand core facilities that are needed for the middle school level. And that's not even included the conversation about athletics or any other type of programming that might be needed. What I do recall several years ago was a discussion of, would it make sense to make one of our other middle schools a year-round middle school? And so making it a year-round on a current middle traditional school campus and converting that. But I've not been part of any discussion I've heard that would expand Hillsborough Elementary School. And I don't think with our current funding and what we're looking at for renovations, we would be able to convert that school to a middle school campus as well.
And if I could just comment on the research, while certainly we can revisit research, take a deep dive into the research. My recollections with regards to like districts that are district-wide year-round, that the results are mixed. And so again, we can revisit, but based on my recollections, the results are mixed. And so why that is, I don't know, would have to revisit the research.
Okay, and what about expanding the space, using the unutilized space for expanding the campus enrollment? Is that a possibility? Right, I think there's a bit, I'll just leave it. I think you have the question, you have to answer it tonight. It's just something I wonder if we should be looking at.
Okay, I see Will's hand up.
Thank you. As well, just wanted to thank Ms. Kreider for her time tonight and pointing out all of the different areas that they've been working on and the changes that the school's been making, and staff for bringing in the recommendations. One question I had is for us to be very transparent about this process. How would someone look up if they fall into the historic academic achievement at or below 2.5? Where would they go to find that out?
Yeah, so what we would do is if this is approved by the board, we would have those published, and there's ways that we can look up your segment and be able to utilize and show. I think we tried to condense it down to a map that was actually, but we just couldn't get it shown here. And so Catherine may have some other ideas of how we would be able to show that, but we can certainly, highlight those.
Yeah, I just want to make
concern. Oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
One concern was that some of the planning segments in your district are very small, and we run the risk of identifying someone looking at that map and saying, oh, that's Catherine who got the one. So we want to be careful about that as well.
So because we haven't gone through the reassignment process, those segments have not been balanced and have not been updated in many years. So that's part of our processes as we work through the reassignment planning. But certainly, like all the maps that we had, Catherine and I down south, I mean, when you look at a school zone, you can see the planning segment, you can see the numbers. I mean, the school published maps of the school zones, the segments are indicated.
There are so many segments in this district that, again, they're much smaller. And in a previous, more southern area, where Patrick and I worked together, it represented originally one busload that would go from one place to another. That's not how things were set up here. And, it's a much more enlightened approach here. However, they're so very small that I really think, you could, unless we did some masking, it would be very obvious who scored what.
Yeah, I just hope we can be transparent on it. I hear what you're saying, just some way for people to know where they are as they're considering this. The only other comment that I was going to make is I am very supportive of a middle school year round and what options there are. I mean, I'm not saying go convert a school, but I definitely would like to hear ideas around what we can do or increase the capacity as well. Thank you.
Okay. Hillary, and then Sarah, and then Bonnie.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for these recommendations. I really appreciate you spending so much effort bringing these forward so we can have these conversations. I think it's really important that we look at making all of our programs accessible to all of the students in our district. I know we have so many caring staff members, and our year-round program is a great program. And I just hope this board will be careful and slow roll the middle school situation. I think that it is difficult to justify expanding a program that's 85% white for me personally. So I hope that if we can crack the code of making it a diverse place where everyone has access to it, that we absolutely look at expanding it if the need is there. But if we're serving 85% white families and 85%, high socioeconomic families, I'm not sure that I could personally support it. So just going to put that out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Hillary. Sarah, and then Bonnie.
I just wanted to go back to a couple of the other pieces that were mentioned in all that is leading to the school not being as representative of the district. The one thing I was wondering about I was fascinated by the application window being so much earlier than when somebody would normally register their kid for kindergarten. Fun fact, I almost missed registering my oldest for kindergarten. I called up the school the week of and was like, what's going on? They were like, registration is this week. So, I think information, not everybody has access to information. I was wondering, the purpose for changing the timeline was that families might then want to request other transfers. And I was curious how often that actually happens. And, does that actually play out, the reason that we bumped the application even earlier? And is there any world where we could place this application at the same timeline as people are applying to kindergarten? The Hillsborough kindergarten specific piece, is there a way to place it closer to?
So one of the things is this process does take time because we have an application window. We also have to confer with all of the individuals who are at the school if they're coming back or not, because for every student whose family says they're not coming back next year, that's another slot in the lottery process that we then can seat another student. And then once someone's notified that they're in their application's been accepted, we have to give them a seat. We have to give them an opportunity to accept the seat and then go on to the next person on the list. And so the letters, the notification, the processes takes about 90 days from once that lottery's ran to be completed. And then with our general transfers as well, then we get into any feedback or processes where individuals request a hearing or they request a review. And so it takes us time to work through. I think that would be a concern with waiting. The other, they applying to other schools. It's not just within district. What we heard was folks apply to charter schools and they apply to other locations. And we want to not defer them to charter schools because they haven't heard back from us and whether or not they were accepted into one of our choice programs or were accepted into another school on transfer. And so the other premise was they all were running their lotteries in December, January, early January, mid-January. And so we are also trying to get our families notified early on. So that's just part of the reason it's happening so soon. I do think what is permissible and something we certainly could look at is we have this first round we go through with people who are here, people who have been notified, people who understand, who live here, the processes. But then as those families register for kindergarten, either adding them to the wait list if they're interested or running a lottery, or we could look at, and I would have to talk to staff and Christine, is there a possibility that we if they're interested, we get their information at that time so that they could at least get on a wait list if there was slots that open up or people move at the end of the year, or folks decide they're not coming back. Catherine?
Well, I'm new, but it's too late for this year, but I do believe that there are things we can do with our existing software and other programs where people can rank their choices. Right now, people are only allowed to apply for one thing. So if we allowed them to say, oh, Hillsborough is my first choice and then Central is my second choice, that would help. And I definitely agree with Patrick about the ability for people who enroll later in the year to just be added to a wait list. And there are lots of things that we can discuss, but for the future.
And one thing I just want to make sure demographics are correct. I think Ms. McKenzie, you referenced us being an 85% white school. We're not 85%, we're at 77%. So I just want to make sure that that statistic is corrected.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for correcting that. Do you mind telling me how many classroom teachers of color you guys have right now?
So our whole staff?
I just meant classroom teachers.
Sure. So we have both Asian, Hispanic, Black, multiracial, and white teachers all present, at Hillsborough Elementary, and that's all staff.
All right then. Thank you.
Okay, did I lose? I see your hand up, Will, but I feel like was Bonnie supposed to go, and then Will,
and then
Yeah.
Brenda.
I just wanted to mention that Orange County is piloting a point-to-point transportation system. And I wonder if we decide to open up this transportation system, if they might work with us and maybe we can leverage that. And I realize there's some restriction when you're moving school kids around, although I went to school on a public transportation bus, but I think it's worth a conversation with the county to see if we might be able to, if they might be willing to work with us to get it happening quicker. So just a thought. And I didn't know, you have to answer it for us. Do you want us to give you an extra week? And maybe it's a question for Ms. Kreider or Catherine. Do you want us to give you an extra couple of weeks to allow more applicants to come in under the new rules? Or would you prefer we just let it go as scheduled? Do you want more time?
I mean, historically, the numbers that we have right now in the lottery are higher than we've had at this time in the past. I don't know where they fall in those demographic, in the different zones, but we've kind of been clear about the lottery window being January, the month of January. So that would be up to you whether or not you want to expand it for another week or so.
Ms. Mao, did you want to respond to that, or?
Well, I'm new, so I don't feel like I should comment too in depth, and you did vote on the open and closed schools and the different deadlines in December, and maybe this is the year to stick with it and then start investigating other options in future years. But I will do whatever Patrick and the board recommend.
Thank you.
Defer to
Dr. Felder.
Yeah, no, I was just going to chime in. Thank you all so much. And I agree with, and actually was going to say something similar to what Ms. Mal just mentioned. And I would also think if we did extend, we would have to extend for all choice schools, not just for Hillsborough Elementary.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Felder. Will, and then Brenda, I think.
Yes, so I just wanted to follow up on the middle school discussion because that is listed as one of the barriers. And I've talked to many people in our community that won't consider it because they don't want their kids on middle school or I don't want my kid on a different middle school. So I just want to be very clear that if we're looking at moving barriers, this is the first step. Next step is, getting more off the list, because if people aren't applying, regardless of what our lottery is, it's not going to change. So we're going to have to, I think, look at these other options to figure out how do we ensure we remove as many barriers for families as possible. Thank you.
Brenda?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to say to the principal and Patrick and everybody who's been working on this, I appreciate it, because, we've been talking about the lack of diversity at this school for over a decade, and it's been talk. But with all of the parameters that you are putting in place, I believe that we're actually going to move forward to do something about it. We've just been talking forever. And to the principal, one first good step I see here is that I thank you for picturing our actual students. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of stock photos on our slides. And when our community can see their kids, they feel included and they feel good about it. So to the principal, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. It makes a difference. And I certainly hope that we will do all of the things that you said in the recommendations so that we can have a more diverse student population. I do want to follow up on one question. You listed a plethora of diverse teachers. So say you got 50 teachers, and out of all the 50, how many of those are the diverse ones? Like 10, 20, half of them? What?
So we do have, if you want to break it down by like teachers, and off the top of my head, I don't know all of our the specific numbers of teachers versus TAs versus staff versus a lot of our groups, but we have over the past few years, that's been a goal of ours, is to increase the number of minority and diverse staff that we have at Hillsborough Elementary, and it's a slow process, and because we don't have a lot of turnover,
right?
And so when we do, it's important to us, even in positions like social working and in the student support areas, so we're always seeking out to have that diverse population as we can and fill those positions.
Good. Now, excuse me, you mentioned teacher assistants. I specifically was referring to teachers, and I'll tell you why. I went to a classroom a couple of days ago, and a little girl ran up to me and said, "Oh, I am so happy to see you in this classroom." Well, it was a little Black girl who said that to me, and I know exactly what she meant, because she said, "Are you our teacher today?" And I said, "Yes, I'm your teacher." So the teacher makes it. It's good to have a diverse everybody else, but the teacher really makes a big difference. I just wanted to throw that out there. And thank you again. I really mean it about those pictures. It means a lot. They're not stock pictures, and because you can tell the stock photos. Your kids look like they were having a good old time.
Hillary?
Brenda, the answer to that question is 2 classroom teachers at HES. And the reason that matters is because they're the ones that take the heat for hard conversations that are happening in that school. And that's how you change the culture. So I just think it's really important to name it. And I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, okay. Well, I know it's important, because I was shocked when the little girl came up and hugged me, because she thought I was her teacher, but I was just a teacher for 3 days, not forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long, slow process to shift staff, and I know when that's happened in some of our other elementary schools, I've just been really pleased, and it's slow progress. And I just hope we can continue to do things like, because this came up in our student forums too, when kids feel like they don't see staff and teachers who represent them, what can we do to push that in more? And I agree that other staff as well, but do we need to bring in diverse speakers? Do we need to bring in diverse authors? You know, there's so many things we might really need to work to do to create that environment where students are seeing the person, the leader, you know, the leader in charge look like them. So
we couldn't disagree with you more. Those, and actually it's three teachers of color. And that's why the work of our equity team and that positive climate team of leading those brave, not perfect conversations is so important, right? Because we need to be having that dialogue and that vocabulary about diversity and inclusivity, you know, and belonging. What does that mean, right? And that's the work that all of our teachers are championing and having those difficult conversations, and that's important.
Yeah, so I thank you for being here, Ms. Kreider, because they are hard conversations. And so thank you for fielding these questions tonight. And thank you to all the staff who are working on making some shifts here. Any closing comments from board members before we I ask for a motion in regards to the priorities advised by Dr. Felder and her team?
No. I move that we accept the recommendation by the team. They've done a terrific job.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Vice Chair Stevens, and I couldn't tell who the second was from.
This is me, Hillary.
Ms. McKenzie, thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Stevens?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, we have one action item left. And if we choose not to spend an hour on it, we can be done before 10.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
yeah, because this item was slated for 30 minutes and we took an hour.
That's okay. This was a
It
worthy
sure is.
topic.
It was worth it. It was worth it.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so Dr. Felder, are we inviting Ms. Hatcher and Mr. Abele to lead this time for us?
We are indeed. But first, I would like to thank again Mrs. Kreider and Ms. Smile for joining Mr. Aberley in this presentation, and to the board for your support of the priorities tonight to increase diversity at Hillsborough Elementary. So thank you. Okay, so Mr. Aberley and Ms. Hatcher.
I think Ms. Hatcher's going to lead off here, and then I'll pick up.
Okie dokie.
Okay. Good evening, Good evening, board chair, board members, Dr. Felder, and thank you, Mr. Aberley. I want to lead the discussion this evening and start with the two board policies for first read, and those two policies are 2300 and 2310. We discussed these two policies in our December 17th board policy meeting. Board committee meeting. No, that is incorrect. The board policy meeting. It is late and I do apologize. So the first policy we're going to look at and note some changes. You all did receive in assembly on Thursday the updates to the policy in way of strikeouts or markouts. So the first policy we're going to look at is 2300, and that policy is board meetings. We did make a recommendation to add to this section the wording after June 1 to add the following wording: that the superintendent should keep on file the schedule of regular meetings with the time and the place, ensure schedule is posted publicly. The schedule will be revised only in accordance with legal requirements for notice. So that was the first recommended change. The second recommended change will fall under meeting calendar. We're going to remove the items regular meeting and work session. Want to note for regular meeting, the update will be that the meeting will generally be held on the second and fourth Monday of each month. except as modified in the official meeting calendar adopted by the board. Any items that you also were receiving here that, let's see here. Also too, I just want to make sure I'm getting my notes here correctly. We're going to remove the regular meeting there. Then also too, under, let me see here. We're going to add the wording that talks about the open session proportion of the meeting will not last longer than 3 hours except by majority of the vote. Majority vote of the board. Any items on the agenda at the end of the meeting should maybe we remove the wording 10 p.m. and may be carried over to our next meeting. So those are our recommendations for first read on this policy. And I do know that Eva should be on the call as well. She did help with these revisions per our meeting. So if there are any questions, I'm prepared to answer those now.
Does anyone have questions for Ms. Hatcher or for Ms. Dubison?
I just have one. Are we going to go policy by policy to each one?
I'm not sure what Mr. Ablay is going to do, but I'm just going to, and I don't have to do it in this format, but I was just indicating what was what the changes were. If I don't need to, I don't have to. And I'm not sure what Mr. Ablay is how he's going to present his. And the next one I have, there are very, very few changes on the next one I do have.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? I see Bonnie has her hand up. I can't see everyone else right now, though.
I do have a comment on policy 2310. And that's B2, since we're no longer distinguishing business meetings and work sessions, that section B1 suffices, and I think we can strike section B2. I think it's superfluous. It's redundant, actually.
Ms. Dubison, can you comment on that, please?
Yes, that's fine. That I don't object if the board, so generally we would pass them through first reading to second reading. So if the board agrees with that, someone just include it in your motion to make that revision to 2310. And I will note, as far as the process tonight, most of the updates, or many of the updates, are just periodic updates from the School Board Association that probably don't require review in detail. These particular ones were generated from the board rather than from those outside recommendations. So I think that's why we addressed them in more detail.
Thank you, Eva. Questions other than, let's see, Will's hand is up.
Yeah, so I'm guessing we're just going to comment on the ones we have comments on versus.
Yeah, let's just comment on these first two.
Okay, that's fine. So on 2310, the only concern I have is I do see that public comment will be limited to 1 hour. My only concern is if we have 5 agenda items and some group comes in and signs up the first 20 people, the other people that want to comment on other items that are on the agenda will never hear. So I'm not sure the answer to that, but I am concerned that the 1 hour limit is going to cause us to not hear from people that just come in to speak on other agenda items. So I guess I'm going to ask Eva, do you know how other districts handle this, or is there?
A 1 hour limit is common. Some have shorter. I think, we're doing away with the requirement that you sign up for a certain agenda item. So I guess what you're saying is the first 20 people might all have the same perspective. And I guess that's true anytime. And the board can vote in a certain meeting if there's a lot going on. The board could vote to waive this and extend the deadline. Yeah, you don't have to have a limit. I find that can be helpful. And generally the way we handle it and the way you have been handling it is just to limit the number of people who will sign up.
So the other question I had, Eva, around that is, and it makes sense because we won't be able to do business if we have it unlimited, right? The second question I have around it is, it says it's limited to 1 hour per meeting. Is that total people talk time, or is that typically, hey, we started the public comment at 6 o'clock and now it's 7 and it was 5 people because, finding the person and telling them they can go, I'm just curious in practicality how.
So that's up to the board. The way you have typically handled it is because otherwise the timekeeping can become, the math is hard. If you're actually like timing, well, this person had 3 minutes, but they only talked 2 minutes and 42 seconds, is to say each person has 3 minutes. So 20 people equals 60 minutes.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I had for that one. Thank you.
Okay. Bonnie, I think I can,
Yeah,
I can't see you yet, but is there anyone else other than Bonnie who wants to speak to these two policies? Okay, go ahead, Bonnie.
I just want to build on Will's point, because the whole reason, I think the board, Brenda, you were on the board at the time, but the whole reason the board split these work sessions and business meetings was because the public was coming in and taking up all the time on topics that were not germane to the agenda. And they just wanted to be, they just would take up a lot of time. And so that's why something like a half hour for topics that are not on the agenda, and a half hour. And then I think if it's on the agenda, the public gets as long as they want to talk about it. But I'm with Will. I'm worried about groups coming in and co-opting the agenda for their purposes.
The one thing I'll say about that is it has been our experience that if you limit it, if you tell people they have to be related to an agenda item, they will say it is, and they will just pick one. And it will be well into their comment before you can really determine if that's true or not. And so I think the experience of the chair was that was kind of impossible to.
Math 180.
Right. So it lately has not worked as well as perhaps it worked when initially adopted.
Yeah, I'm used to a structure. The county commissioners use a structure where you sign up on an item that's not on the agenda, and then you sign up to speak on the agenda item if you want. And then and those comments are only allowed when the agenda item is, they're allowed, essentially staff makes the presentation, and then public comment, and then the board deliberates, which has the added value of placing public comments in the context of the topic, as opposed to people just speaking at, in a random order. The policy committee wasn't so favorable to that. I think there was a concern about parents, but from a meeting perspective, it really runs well. If you have a lot of people, if we have a lot of people, it means that we're doing something's probably not exactly working well, but anyway, I'm willing to go lots of ways. I do think we should, that's all.
Okay. Any other discussion, or can I have a motion on these two policies or one of them?
So moved for the first two policies, 2300 and 2310. But, I understand from Eva that we should make an adjustment in the motion.
So with the deletion of 2310B2.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Mr. Atherton. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Great. First read of those two policies have passed. I'll pass back to you, Ms. Hatcher, or unless you're passing to Mr. Abele for.
I
this
am
next.
passing I am passing to Mr. Obley, and thank you for the approval of first reading of these two policies.
Thank you so much for your work, Ms. Hatcher.
All right, good evening again. So there are 9 policies listed here. I have given you a guiding memo as part of your packet that outlines each of the policies. I shared this with the policy committee, and there were a couple recommendations that have been incorporated with the feedback from the December 17th policy meeting. Within each of the items, it includes any North Carolina School Boards Association required changes to the policy, any School Boards Association recommended changes to the policy because we do use their policy templates, and then any administrative recommendations so you can see the justifications for any changes being recommended. The first policy, 1500, is just a technical policy. It will not, or technical change, it will not come back before you. It's just aligning that policy with the School Boards Association policy manual. I've just included it so we have a record of where policy 1500 went to and why it was changed. But because it's a technical correction, just alignment to policy, I don't believe you need a vote to do that. And I'll defer to the, yeah, okay. And so the next, would you like me to go through each one? I know you have the background and the information. I don't want to waste your time since you have the information before you. So I'll just pause then if you've got questions.
Yeah, any questions, Will?
I have one for policy 1510, section C, where it says, it starts with all exterior doors must remain locked unless being monitored by employee in order to ensure no unauthorized individuals are entering the building. Employees shall immediately report the loss of an ID badge or key to their immediate supervisor. I would like to see us add in that employees shall immediately report any doors or windows that do not lock or close. I mean, you can lose your key or badge, but if the door doesn't lock or close, then it won't matter. So it seems like in the spirit of what this is saying, we should also include that as well.
Okay.
Sarah had her hand up and then Bonnie.
I was just going to say I didn't feel the need to go through each one and thank Mr. Obley for the memo summarizing the changes. That was helpful.
Agreed.
Okay. Bonnie, do you still have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just have a couple of simple questions on the 9000 series. First, on 9010, should the town of Hillsborough and the city of Mebane also be listed since they have zoning jurisdiction in the district? And it's just a question. On 930, I have a question about accommodating design, build, and performance contracts. Because sometimes depending on how I read the policies, it implies that architects and engineers are separate from the contract. Obviously, we always want licensed professionals doing the work, but they may be part of a construction team, especially if it's a large project. So in section A, I wondered if we should add something that specifies that the services, the A&E services, may be part of the contract. And then in C2, it suggests that if a change is over $300,000, that we kick it over to the architects and engineers as though they're a separate organization. And I guess there's a question about, are we looking for an independent organization or an expert? And so I wonder if those $300,000 changes should be kicked back to the superintendent instead. Again, I just don't, if it's a big change, I don't want, we might want someone independent from the, so start again. Architects and engineers may be part of the construction contract. And then separately, if there's a big overrun on the project, I don't want the people who have the overrun to be approving the change. So
I want to, or when you say 300, do you mean 30,000?
300,000 was, says if it's over 300,000, it has to get kicked back to the architect and engineering. And if they're part of the contract, that doesn't make sense. Maybe it does, I don't know.
I'm sorry, are you in 9110?
No, I'm sorry, I went to 9030. 9010 was just on the Hillsborough and City and Mebane, the rest was 9030. The school construction. And again, I wanted to be clear that some of our contracts, the architects and engineers may be part of the construction contract.
So as I'm looking through, that was currently in policy, and there is some general statute language around projects that are greater in excess of $300,000 and the requirements for that. I think what we've done in the policy on change orders and contract, we've actually lowered that in policy. Above that in C for change orders, we require and have reduced it from $100,000 to $50,000. So that requirement, I believe, is a general statute requirement that they submit those on those formal projects, but we require documentation and approval for any change order, but any change orders over $50,000 require additional approval.
Yeah, and I think
I understand. I was talking about point 2, additional requirements for contracts in excess of 300,000. And it's saying that the contractor shall submit a proposed change to the project architect or engineer for review. And my only question is, how does that work if the project architect or engineer is part of the contractor? So I just wonder if they should just submit the change in writing to the superintendent for action, and leave it there.
so. This does come from a legal distinction that under Chapter 133, that what the purpose of the statute is to ensure that public buildings don't undertake big projects consulting an architect, right? And so that's what we have under.
I understand that.
Section B. Well, let me finish. And so under Section B, it says, if you have any project over X amount, even if it's not a new building, but just a renovation, you have to consult an architect. So then the point of the change order is just to point out that even if your project's already been to an architect, if the contractor now says we need to amend, and it's going to be this large cost increase, you have to go back to the architect and have them review that. So regardless of whether, so I wouldn't take that requirement out. I think that is necessary, legally speaking. As to if they're employed by the same firm, I'm not sure I have enough frame of reference to give an opinion on whether we would also hire an independent architect. I think it would depend, but I wouldn't want to take out the requirement that it go through the project's architect.
I agree with that. I just am trying to be accommodating to projects that are design build contracts or performance contracts, that where the architect is part of the construction team. So if we want independence, this doesn't do it. But if that doesn't matter to us, then this works fine.
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying it's hard to make a blanket statement that you do it every time or no time.
Yeah, so let me make it really easy. On point 2, I was just thinking that we could just do the proposed change in writing, period, for, and because I don't know exactly how that would work. If there are architects and engineers because I think it's a $300,000 change. And so if they're the architect and engineer, if that's part of the contract team, do we have, I think we want to have some discretion on how we review that, but it might not be them. That's what you know what I mean? It might be different, we may choose to, I mean, it really depends if we're talking about a $15 million contract or a $1 million contract. So, it's hard to really look at this. I just don't want to imply that the fox can guard the hen house. That if the architect and the engineers are part of the contract team, they might not be the final authority on reviewing large changes. That's my bottom line.
And I don't disagree with that. I guess I don't think I would not strike to the project architect or engineer for review. If you, in a certain situation, also want an independent review, of course, you could do that. But
Okay.
I don't think it's either or.
Okay, so if the contract includes the architects, then the contractor submits it to themselves. And then we're covered because we have to approve it because it's over 50,000. So, right, that's kind of what you're saying. And that works. That works because we review it anyway.
Yeah, any change order of that size would come back to the board.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to either proceed, Mr. Abalay, or do you want to answer questions on all of them? And then maybe there's gonna be a motion to it.
Yeah, before I lose track of the questions, let me back up to 9010 for Hillsborough and Mebane was not mentioned because they do not have specific school construction standards. Although within the zoning, we would follow whatever the local requirements. They're not specific. That the town of Hillsborough and Mebane, we do follow the Orange County school construction standards in the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. But right now, there's no other specific school construction standards that I'm aware of that have been presented from either of those entities.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members?
I'll move the policy. I'll move. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're gonna make a motion, Bonnie?
No, Will I think has a question. Were you raising your hand?
I was going to make a motion with the amendment. So I'll just make the motion with the amendment to 1510 and approval of the rest of the first readings.
Great. I have a motion from Mr. Atherton and a second from Vice Chair Stevens. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
And I'm yes, that is great. They have passed first reading with that amendment there. And Dr. Felder, is there anything else you would like us to discuss tonight, or should we entertain a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Ms. McKenzie. Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
And Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention this evening. Have a great night.
Yes. Love it.